Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable, and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Joshua Ironheart, and I've been a park ranger for 8 years now. Most folks just call me Josh. I work the high country around Mount Mitchell in North Carolina, the tallest peak east of the Mississippi River. It's beautiful up there, but it can kill you if you're not careful. I learned about being careful the hard way. Lost my dad in a mine collapse when I was 12. Then spent 3 years in the Pacific during the war, watching good men die because they made one small mistake. When I came home in '46, I knew I wanted to work somewhere clean and open. The mountains called to me. December of 1955 was the worst winter anyone could remember. Snow started falling on the 10th and didn't stop for 2 weeks. The roads up to the summit got blocked, then the phone lines went down. We had a weather research station up there with 5 scientists studying winter storms. They'd been up there since October, taking measurements and sending reports back to the Weather Service. Their last radio message came through on December 18th. It was Dr. Coleman, the team leader. His voice sounded strange, kind of hollow. "Base camp, this is Summit Station. We're having some problems up here. Something's wrong with the hunger. The hunger won't stop. Please send." Then nothing but static. My boss, Captain Morrison, tried raising them for 6 hours. Nothing. The storm was getting worse, with winds hitting 60 miles per hour and the temperature dropping to 20 below. No way to get a truck up there, and the helicopter couldn't fly in that mess. "We'll have to wait it out," Morrison said. But I kept thinking about Dr. Coleman's voice. Something's wrong with the hunger. What did that mean? I knew those mountains better than anyone. Knew every trail, every cave, every dangerous spot where people got themselves killed. I'd pulled 23 people off those peaks in 8 years, and never lost one. But I'd never heard anyone talk about hunger like that before. The old Cherokee folks who lived down in the valley had stories about Black Mountain. They called it a sacred place, said it had spirits that protected it. Most of the time I figured that was just old tales. But when Mrs. Sarah Crowwing heard about the lost research team, she came to see me at the ranger station. "That mountain don't like strangers staying too long in winter," she said. Her grandson Daniel sometimes helped us with search and rescue. Good tracker, knew the old ways. The lean times wake up things that should stay sleeping. I thanked her politely, but I was thinking practical thoughts. 5 men trapped in a storm, running low on food maybe, getting scared, maybe going a little crazy from being stuck together too long. I'd seen it before. People do strange things when they're scared and hungry. But that night, lying in my bunk at the station, I kept hearing Coleman's voice in my head. Something's wrong with the hunger. Like it was alive. Like it was hunting. The storm howled outside my window, and for the first time in years, I felt afraid. 3 days later, the wind finally died down enough for me to try the climb. Morrison wanted to wait for backup, but I couldn't stand thinking about those men up there another day. I'd done plenty of winter rescues, had good gear, knew the route, and I was strong from all my years in the mountains. I started before dawn, carrying a 60-pound pack with medical supplies, emergency food, and radio equipment. The snow was 4 feet deep in places, but I had snowshoes and plenty of experience. The first few miles went fine. Cold, but not dangerous if you knew what you were doing. About halfway up, I found the first tracks. They were human footprints in the snow, but something was wrong with them. They were bare feet. No shoes, no boots, just naked human feet walking through snow that was 20 below zero. The prints were deep and clear, like whoever made them was walking. Normal and easy. But the toes looked wrong. Too long, with what looked like claw marks at the tips. I followed them for a quarter mile. They led straight up the mountain, never stopping, never hesitating. Where a normal person would have to rest or find shelter, these tracks just kept going. And there were drops of blood in the snow next to them, frozen solid and dark red. The blood wasn't scattered like you'd expect from someone hurt and stumbling. It was in perfect little circles, spaced exactly 3 feet apart, like someone was walking steady and bleeding at the same rhythm. I tried my radio. "Base camp, this is Ironheart. I'm finding some strange tracks up here. Look like bare footprints, but that's impossible in this weather. Static. Then Morrison's voice, crackling and distant. Say again, Josh, you're breaking up. I said I found tracks, human tracks, but they don't make sense. More static. Josh, your signals. Can't hear. Check in every hour. Then nothing. I was on my own. The tracks led me right to the research station. It was a solid wooden building, built to handle mountain weather. But when I got close enough to see it clearly, my stomach went cold. The front door was hanging open, moving back and forth in the wind. Snow had blown inside, covering everything in white. But that wasn't what made me stop and stare. There were things arranged in the snow around the building. Geometric patterns made of sticks and rocks and pieces of equipment, perfect circles and triangles and shapes I didn't have names for. They were too precise, too careful, like someone had spent hours making them just right, and they were made of more than just sticks and rocks. I walked closer, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Some of the patterns were made of bones, human bones, picked clean and white, leg bones and arm bones and what looked like ribs, all arranged in perfect spirals and crosses. My hand started shaking, and it wasn't from the cold. I pulled out my pistol and moved toward the building. The snow crunched under my boots, too loud in the silence. Everything was wrong. No smoke from the chimney. No lights. No sounds of people moving around inside. Just the wind and the creak of the door swinging back and forth. Inside was worse. The research equipment was still there. Weather instruments, radios, scientific gear. But it was all arranged in the same geometric patterns I'd seen outside. Stacked and sorted with impossible precision, like someone had spent days organizing everything into perfect shapes. The furniture was pushed against the walls. In the center of the room, the floor was covered with scratches, deep gouges in the wood, like something with claws had been digging at it. The scratches formed the same spiral patterns I'd seen in the snow. There was a smell in the air, sweet and rotten, like meat left out too long. It was strongest near the scratches in the floor. I found the first body in the kitchen. Dr. Peterson, the youngest member of the team. He was sitting at the table, but he wasn't all there anymore. Parts of him were missing, clean cuts, like someone had used a very sharp knife. His face was gone, but I recognized his jacket. On the table in front of him was a plate with small, neat pieces of meat arranged in a triangle. The meat was frozen, but it was fresh, and I could tell it had come from Dr. Peterson. My stomach tried to empty itself, but I held it down. I'd seen bad things in the war, but this was different. This was careful, planned, like someone had taken their time and enjoyed the work. I heard a sound from upstairs, a scraping noise, like fingernails on wood. Then a voice called down to me. Josh? Josh Ironheart? Is that you? It was Dr. Coleman's voice, but it sounded wrong. Too cheerful, too excited. I'm so glad you came, Josh. We've been waiting for you. We're so very hungry, and you look delicious. I grabbed my radio and backed toward the door. Base camp, this is Ironheart. Emergency at the summit station. I need backup now. Nothing but static. The scraping sound came again, moving across the ceiling above me. Then I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Slow, careful steps, like someone trying not to make noise. I ran. Outside, the wind hit me like a wall, but I didn't care. I had to get away from that building, and whatever was inside it. I made it about 50 yards before I heard the front door slam open behind me. Josh, where are you going? Don't you want to stay for dinner? I turned around and saw Dr. Coleman standing in the doorway. At least, it looked like Dr. Coleman. Same height, same brown hair, same wire-rimmed glasses. But something was very wrong with his face. His mouth was too wide. It stretched from ear to ear, showing way too many teeth. Sharp teeth, like a wolf's. And his eyes were completely black. Not dark brown, black like holes in his head. He started walking toward me, and I could see that his feet were bare. The same feet that had made the tracks I'd followed up the mountain. His toes were long and ended in black claws, and he wasn't leaving any tracks in the snow now. We've been so hungry, Josh, he said in that cheerful voice. Hungry for so long, but you're here now, and you smell so good, so warm and alive. I fired my pistol at him. 3 shots, center mass, just like they taught me in the army. All 3 bullets hit him in the chest, and he staggered backward. Then he laughed. "That tickles," he said, and kept walking toward me. I ran again. Down the mountain, crashing through the snow, not caring about the noise or the energy I was wasting. Behind me, I could hear him following, not running, just walking at that same steady pace. Like he knew he'd catch me eventually. I made it to a thick stand of pine trees and dove behind them, trying to catch my breath and think. My radio crackled to life. "Josh, this is Morrison. What's your status?" I whispered into the microphone. "Captain, something's very wrong up here. The research team. They're not human anymore. Something's happened to them." "Say again?" "You're breaking up." "I said they're not human, Doctor. Coleman just walked through 3 bullets like they were nothing." "You need to send help." Long pause. Then, "Josh, you might be getting altitude sickness. Hallucinations are common above." The radio went dead. I looked at it and saw that the battery compartment had been ripped open. The batteries were gone. "Looking for these?" I spun around. Dr. Coleman was standing 10 feet away, holding my batteries in his impossibly long fingers. He hadn't made a sound walking through the snow. "The mountain told us you were coming," he said. "It's been so long since we had fresh meat. The others are getting excited." Behind him, I could see more figures moving through the trees. 4 of them, walking in perfect formation. The rest of the research team, they all had the same black eyes, the same 2 wide mouths full of sharp teeth. I pulled out my emergency flare and lit it. The red light cast everything in a hellish glow, and the possessed men stopped walking. "Fire," one of them said. It sounded like Dr. Williams, but his voice was layered with other voices, like a whole crowd talking at once. "He has fire." They backed away from the light, but they didn't leave. They just stood there, watching me with those black eyes. I started backing down the mountain, keeping the flare between us. It was working. They were afraid of the fire. But the flare wouldn't last long, and I had only 2 more. That's when I saw the lights coming up the trail below me. Morrison and the backup team. 3 rangers with flashlights and winter gear, climbing toward us. They didn't know what they were walking into. "Stay back," I yelled down at them. "Don't come up. Here, they're not human." But the wind carried my words away, and they kept climbing. Dr. Coleman smiled with those terrible teeth. "More friends," he said. "How wonderful. We haven't had a proper feast in so long." The 4 possessed researchers spread out, moving to surround the climbing rescue team. They moved like wolves, coordinated and patient. In a few minutes, Morrison and his men would walk right into their trap. I had to choose. Stay safe with my flare, or go down and warn them. I chose the only thing I could live with. I threw the flare at Dr. Coleman and ran down the mountain, screaming warnings into the wind. "Morrison, get back! Run!" I crashed through the snow toward the rescue team, waving my arms and yelling. Behind me, I could hear the possessed researchers moving through the trees, no longer trying to be quiet. Morrison looked up as I reached them. With him were Rangers Peterson and Davis, plus an older Cherokee man I recognized, Daniel Crow Wing, Mrs. Sarah's grandson. "Josh, what the hell?" Morrison started. "We have to go, now." I grabbed his arm. "The research team, they're not human anymore. Something's possessed them." Peterson laughed. "Come on, Josh. You've been up there too long." A howl echoed through the trees above us. Not human, not animal. Something in between that made my bones ache with cold fear. Daniel Crow Wing's face went white. "Wendigo," he whispered. "The hunger spirit. I told my grandmother this would happen." 4 shapes appeared in the trees around us, moving wrong, too fluid, like they were floating instead of walking. Dr. Coleman's voice drifted down through the wind. "Welcome, friends. We're so pleased you came to visit. We've been preparing a special meal." Morrison pulled his pistol, but Daniel grabbed his wrist. "Bullets won't work. Fire. We need fire." I lit my second flare. The red light pushed the shapes back, but they didn't disappear. They just stood there, waiting. "There's a supply cache about half a mile down," Morrison said. "Emergency fuel and equipment." "We'll never make it," Davis said. His voice was shaking. "They'll pick us off one by one." Daniel was pulling something from his pack, a small leather pouch and what looked like dried tobacco leaves. "Sacred tobacco," he said. "My grandmother made me bring it. Said the mountain would need an offering." "Doctor." Coleman's laughter echoed around us. Little Indian magic? How quaint. Do you really think your primitive superstitions can stop us? The spirits of this mountain are older than your hunger, Daniel called back, and they remember the proper way. He started spreading the tobacco in a circle around us, chanting in Cherokee. Words I didn't understand, but they felt important. Ancient. The possessed researchers moved closer. I could see them clearly now in the flare light. Their faces were stretched and wrong, like someone had pulled the skin too tight over skulls that were the wrong shape. Their fingers ended in black claws, and when they breathed, frost came out of their mouths, even though the air wasn't that cold. "It's not working," Peterson said. "They're still coming." Daniel kept chanting, but I could see sweat on his face despite the cold. "The offering isn't enough. The hunger spirit is too strong. It needs a willing sacrifice." "What kind of sacrifice?" Morrison asked. "Food," Daniel said. "Someone has to willingly give up their food, their life energy. It breaks the hunger cycle." I looked at my pack. Emergency rations for 3 days. If I gave them up, I'd probably die on the mountain before I could get down to safety. But if I didn't, the first flare was burning down. I lit the third and last one. "I'll do it," I said. "Josh, no," Morrison started. "I know these mountains," I said. "I can make it down without food if I have to, and I've seen what these things can do. We can't let them spread." I opened my pack and pulled out all my food. Canned meat, dried fruit, chocolate bars. Everything I had to keep me alive. I threw it all into the center of Daniel's tobacco circle. "I offer this freely," I said, not sure if I was doing it right. "To the spirits of the mountain. To end the hunger." Daniel's chanting got louder. The tobacco started to smoke, even though there was no fire to light it. The possessed researchers screamed. All at once, like the sound was being ripped out of them. Dr. Coleman's too wide mouth opened impossibly wider, and something dark poured out of it like smoke. "No!" he shouted, but his voice was changing, getting higher, thinner. "We are so hungry. We need. The darkness rose up above the trees, taking shape. 15 feet tall, made of shadow and bone and terrible hunger. It had too many arms, too many eyes, and a mouth full of teeth that belonged to every person it had ever consumed. This was the real thing. The Wendigo, the hunger spirit that had possessed the research team. It looked down at us with eyes like black stars and spoke in a voice like winter wind. "You cannot stop the hunger. It is eternal. It is necessary. It is." Daniel's tobacco circle burst into flames. Real fire this time, bright and clean and warm. The flames spread outward, surrounding the Wendigo in a wall of light. The creature screamed again, but this time it was the sound of something dying. The flames climbed higher, and I could see shapes in the fire. Human shapes, walking away into the light. The souls of everyone the Wendigo had consumed over the years, finally free. Dr. Coleman and his team collapsed in the snow, unconscious, but breathing, human again. The Wendigo gave one last scream and dissolved into smoke that scattered on the wind. The fire died down to embers, then went out. We were alone in the silence of the mountain. 3 hours later, we had the research team down to the base camp. They were alive but unconscious, like they'd been sleeping for weeks. The doctors said it was severe hypothermia and malnutrition, but I knew better. They woke up 2 days later with no memory of what had happened after the storm hit. Said they remembered getting hungry. Then everything went black. The official report listed it as a case of mass-altitude sickness and cabin fever. The truth would have been too hard to explain. But I remember everything. Dr. Coleman shook my hand when they loaded him into the ambulance. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I don't know what happened up there, but I remember your voice. You saved us." Morrison put me in for a commendation. Said I'd shown exceptional bravery in extreme conditions. He never mentioned the supernatural parts in his report, but he didn't question my story either. Smart man, Morrison. Knew when to leave things alone. Daniel Crowing and I became friends after that. He taught me some of the old Cherokee ways, the proper respect to show the mountain spirits. I learned that Black Mountain had been a sacred place for hundreds of years, and that the Cherokee had always known about the hunger spirit. "It wakes up when people get too desperate," he explained. "When they've been hungry too long and start thinking about things they shouldn't think about. The mountain tries to protect itself." The research station was moved to a lower elevation. No more winter camps on the summit. The official reason was safety concerns due to extreme weather. But Daniel and I made sure the Cherokee Nation got consultation rights on any future research. I stayed on as a ranger for 15 more years. Rescued a lot more people, but never lost anyone. Maybe because I learned to listen to the mountain, to respect the old warnings. But I changed after that winter. I can feel when people are hungry now, really hungry, desperate hungry. It makes my skin crawl and my stomach turn. Mrs. Crowwing says, it's a gift from the spirits, payment for my sacrifice. A way to spot trouble before it gets too bad. I retired in 1970 and moved to a cabin near the base of the mountain. Still live there now. Still keep an eye on things. The hunger spirit is gone, but the mountain remembers. And sometimes, in the worst winter storms, I can feel something stirring up there. Something that knows the taste of human desperation. The Cherokee have a new ceremony now, one they perform every winter solstice. Daniel leads it, though he's getting old like me. They burn sacred tobacco and offer food to the mountain spirits, making sure the hunger never gets strong enough to wake up again. I always attend that ceremony, always bring my own offering, because I learned something important up there in the snow and darkness. We're all just a few missed meals away from becoming monsters. The hunger lives in all of us, waiting for the right moment to take control. The trick is feeding it the right things. Community, sacrifice, respect for the old ways, and never, ever going to Black Mountain alone in winter. Some hungers should stay sleeping. My name is William Hawthorne, but everyone calls me Bill. I've been a park ranger here in the Great Smoky Mountains for 13 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these old hills could throw at me. Bears, lost hikers, flash floods, you name it. In all that time, I never lost a single person I was looking for. Not one. That streak ended in October of 1963. I was 35 then, still young enough to hike 20 miles without breaking a sweat, but old enough to know the mountains like my own backyard. My grandfather worked these same hills, digging coal before they made this place a national park. My daddy hunted here as a boy. The Cherokee walked these trails long before any of us showed up. Point is, this land and my family go way back. October 28th started like any other day. Cool morning, leaves crunching underfoot, that crisp mountain air that makes you feel alive. I was checking the trails near Cataract Falls when Sheriff Davidson radioed me about a missing family. Got a Buick Skylark abandoned at the trailhead, he said, his voice crackling through the static. Chicago plates, family of 4, parents and 2 kids maybe 8 and 10 years old, name's Morgan. I hiked down to take a look. The car sat there with all 4 doors wide open, like the family had just vanished into thin air. Their luggage was still in the trunk, untouched. Camping gear laid out neat and tidy, but what got my attention were the scratches on the roof. Deep gouges in the metal, way too big for any black bear I'd ever seen. When were they last spotted? I asked Davidson. 3 days ago. Desk clerk at the motel says they were excited about camping in some hollow they'd read about. Asked about Whispering Ridge. My blood went cold. Local folks had been telling stories about Whispering Ridge for as long as I could remember. Said it was cursed, that people went in but didn't come out the same. I'd always figured it was just mountain superstition, the kind of tall tales that kept tourists from wandering too far off the marked trails. Nobody goes into that hollow, Davidson continued. Least, nobody with any sense, but these city folk, you know how they are. I knew. Every year we got visitors who thought they could handle the wilderness with nothing but a pocket knife and a can-do attitude. Usually we found them within a day or two, scared but fine. This felt different, though. Those claw marks on the car roof made my skin crawl. I gathered my gear, rope, first aid kit, emergency radio, enough supplies for 3 days if needed. The trail to Whispering Ridge started easy enough, well marked and maintained for the first few miles. But as you got deeper into the mountains, the path grew narrow and wild. Past mile marker 12, my radio would be useless. I'd be on my own. The afternoon sun was already getting low by the time I reached the turnoff. Most hikers missed it completely, just a deer trail winding down into the hollow between 2 massive oak trees. But I could see fresh boot prints in the mud, adult-sized and child-sized, heading down into the darkness. I'd been in scarier places. During the war in Korea, I'd crawled through enemy territory in the dead of night. This was just a hiking trail in Tennessee. But something about that hollow made my hands shake as I checked my flashlight batteries. The trees grew thick and twisted as I descended, their branches reaching across the path like gnarled fingers. It got colder too, which made sense going downhill. But this was different. This cold seemed to seep right through my jacket and into my bones. About a mile down, I found the first sign something was wrong. The footprints just stopped. I mean that literally. 1 second I was following clear boot marks in the soft earth, 4 different sets, like I'd been tracking for the past hour. Then nothing, like the Morgan family had just floated up into the air. I knelt down and studied the ground, using every tracking skill my granddaddy had taught me. The prints didn't fade away or get covered by leaves. They ended mid-step on solid rock, clear as day. No scuff marks, no sign of struggle. Just gone. That's when I noticed how quiet it was. In 13 years of hiking these mountains, I'd never heard silence like this. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, no buzz of insects. Even the wind had stopped moving through the trees. It was like the whole forest was holding its breath. I stood up and called out, "Hello, Morgan family, can you hear me?" My voice echoed weird in the hollow, too long, too deep, like it was bouncing off walls that weren't there. And when the echo finally died, I swear I heard something else. Real faint, almost like children laughing. My skin prickled. I pulled out my radio and tried to call Davidson, but got nothing except static. Strange thing was, the static seemed to have a pattern to it, almost like voices whispering in a language I didn't know. I pushed deeper into the hollow, following the creek bed since there was no trail to speak of. The water moved wrong too slow, too thick, like syrup instead of mountain stream water. And cold. When I knelt to fill my canteen, the water was so cold it burned my fingers. That's when I saw them. Toys scattered along the creek bank. A little girl's doll, a toy truck, some kind of wooden whistle, but they weren't thrown around random-like. Someone had arranged them in a perfect circle, each toy pointing toward the center where a child's red sneaker sat all by itself. I'd seen enough missing person cases to know this wasn't normal. Kids don't stop to arrange their toys in geometric patterns when they're lost and scared. Someone else had done this. Or something else. I picked up the sneaker and checked the size, matched what I'd expect from a 10-year-old, but the shoe felt wrong in my hands, too light, like it was hollow inside. And when I turned it over, the sole was completely worn smooth. Not scuffed or dirty like you'd expect from hiking. Smooth as glass. A stick cracked behind me. I spun around, hand moving to the knife on my belt out of pure instinct. But there was nothing there except trees and shadows. Still, I had that feeling you get when someone's watching you. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Morgan family," I called again. "My name is Bill Hawthorne. I'm a park ranger. If you can hear me, stay where you are." This time, the echo came back different. Like my words were being repeated by someone else, in a voice that sounded almost like mine, but not quite. And underneath it, that sound of children laughing again. I dropped the shoe and backed away from the toy circle. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of that hollow, to hike back to my truck and call for backup. But 4 people were missing, 2 of them kids. I couldn't just leave. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees in the space of a heartbeat. My breath started coming out in puffs, and frost began forming on the dead leaves around my feet. In October, in Tennessee. That's when I saw the trees. All around the hollow, the oaks and maples were twisted into spirals, like someone had grabbed them while they were saplings and corkscrewed them into the ground. I'd seen lightning-struck trees before, seen them bent by wind and ice. But this was different. These trees had grown this way, bark and all, in perfect spirals that hurt to look at, and they were all pointing toward the center of the hollow. I followed their direction with my eyes, squinting through the gathering dusk. There, maybe a quarter-mile deeper in, I could see what looked like a clearing. Smoke was rising from it. Not the gray smoke of a campfire, but something darker, oily. That had to be where the Morgans were. I checked my watch. 4:30, which meant I had maybe 2 hours of daylight left. In these mountains, once the sun went down, you were hiking blind unless you had a good flashlight, and something told me I didn't want to be in this hollow after dark. I started toward the clearing, moving as quiet as I could. My boots seemed to crunch extra loud on the fallen leaves, and I kept hearing other sounds, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, like something was pacing me through the trees. Halfway there, I found the photographs. They were scattered around the base of one of those twisted trees like someone had thrown them from a handful. Family photos, the kind people take on vacation. I picked one up and felt my stomach drop. It showed the Morgan family, all right. Mom, Dad, and 2 kids standing in front of their car. But they looked wrong. The parents looked older, way older, with gray hair and wrinkled faces. And the kids looked younger, like toddlers instead of school-age children. I picked up another photo. Same family, but even more wrong. The parents were ancient now, bent over like elderly folks. The children had shrunk to baby size. The last photo made me drop the whole bunch and stumble backward. It showed 4 gravestones with the names Morgan carved on them. Fresh graves with wilted flowers. That's when I heard my name. Bill Hawthorne. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, like the forest itself was speaking. It sounded familiar, though I couldn't place it. Deep and gravelly, like someone who'd smoked too many cigarettes. "Who's there?" I called out, pulling my flashlight even though there was still some daylight left. "Show yourself. You shouldn't have come here, boy." This time I recognized the voice, and my blood turned to ice water. It was my father. My father who died of black lung disease 8 years ago. My father who was buried in the cemetery back in Gatlinburg. "You're not real," I said, but my voice shook saying it. Laughter echoed through the trees, not the children's laughter I'd heard before, but something older and meaner. "Real as these mountains, boy. Real as the Cherokee who walked here before your people came. Real as the families that feed us." I forced myself to keep moving toward the clearing. Had to be some kind of trick, maybe someone playing games with me, but my hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my flashlight steady. The clearing opened up in front of me just as the sun touched the ridgeline. It was bigger than I'd expected, maybe 50 yards across, ringed by those twisted trees. In the center sat the ruins of what looked like an old cabin, who was there like just a stone foundation and a crumbling chimney now. And around the foundation I saw them, 4 figures sitting in a circle, perfectly still. The Morgan family. Even from a distance, I could tell something was terribly wrong with them. They sat too straight, too perfect, like dolls positioned by a child. "Morgan family," I shouted, running toward them. "It's okay, I'm here to help." As I got closer, I could see their faces. The parents looked exactly like they had in those impossible photographs, aged decades beyond their years. Gray hair, wrinkled skin, eyes that stared at nothing. The children looked younger, maybe 5 or 6 instead of 8 and 10, but they were breathing, still alive. "Can you hear me?" I knelt beside the father and shook his shoulder gently. His head turned toward me, and his eyes focused for just a second. "Run," he whispered through cracked lips. "Before sunset, they're waiting." "Who's waiting? Who did this to you?" But his eyes had already gone blank again, staring at something I couldn't see. A new voice spoke behind me, clear and cold as winter air. "You cannot take them, Ranger. They belong to us now." I spun around and saw them stepping out from behind the twisted trees. At first glance, they looked like people, tall, thin figures in old-fashioned clothes. But as they moved closer, I could see they weren't quite right. Their skin was too pale, almost translucent. Their eyes reflected light like an animal's, and they moved too smooth, like they were floating instead of walking. "What are you?" I managed to ask. "We are the Nunehai," the lead figure said. It was wearing what looked like a mix of Cherokee clothing and Civil War-era uniform, all tattered and faded. "We are the people who were forgotten, the people who were driven from these mountains." More of them emerged from the forest. Dozens of pale figures, all wearing clothes from different time periods. Some looked Cherokee, others looked like settlers, soldiers, pioneers. All of them had that same translucent skin and those terrible reflecting eyes. "The Cherokee tell stories about you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're spirits. You're supposed to protect people." The leader laughed, and the sound made my teeth ache. "We protected ourselves when your kind drove us from our homes. We learned to take what we needed to survive. Families make the best replacements." I looked back at the Morgans. They hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked. "What did you do to them?" "We are making them like us, immortal, timeless. By dawn, they will be part of our tribe forever, and we will be renewed. The sun was halfway below the ridge now, maybe an hour of light left. The children will become young again, innocent and pure, the leader continued. The parents will become elders, wise and knowing. They will forget their old lives and remember only us. I won't let you do this. More laughter, this time from all of them at once, creating a horrible harmony that seemed to shake the ground under my feet. You cannot stop what has already begun. Look at your hands, Ranger. I looked down and nearly screamed. The skin on my hands was starting to look pale and translucent, just like theirs. I could see the bones underneath, and my veins looked black instead of blue. It is too late for you as well. You entered our hollow willingly. You became part of our territory. Soon you will be one of us. That's when I remembered what Jimmy Caldwell had told me about Cherokee legends. Not the tourist-friendly stories they told around campfires, but the real ones his grandmother had whispered to him as a child. The Nunnehay could be fought. They had rules, limitations. They were tied to specific places and specific times. And they feared certain things. I pulled out my ranger badge, solid iron, stamped with the National Park Service seal. The moment I held it up, the Nunnehay leader hissed and stepped back. Iron, I said. You don't like iron, do you? Clever. The leader spat. But iron will only delay us. You cannot protect them and yourself with one small piece of metal. He was right. There were too many of them, and they were spreading out around the clearing, cutting off any escape route. The sun was almost gone now, and I could feel whatever they'd done to me getting stronger. My whole body felt cold and strange. But I'd learned a few things in Korea about being outnumbered and outgunned. Sometimes you don't try to win. Sometimes you just try to survive long enough for help to arrive. I reached into my pack and pulled out the emergency flare I always carried. Standard park ranger equipment, designed to signal for help from miles away. But it would do more than signal tonight. You said you don't like loud noises either, I said, and pulled the pin. The flare exploded like a miniature sun, filling the clearing with brilliant red light and a scream of sound that echoed off the mountains. The Nunnehay shrieked and scattered, their translucent forms seeming to flicker and fade in the harsh light. But they didn't disappear completely. As my eyes adjusted, I could see them regrouping at the edge of the tree line, waiting. Bill Hawthorne! I spun toward the sound and nearly cried with relief. Jimmy Caldwell was crashing through the underbrush at the edge of the clearing, his ranger uniform torn and muddy. Behind him came an old Cherokee man I'd seen around town but never met. Jimmy! Thank God, how did you find me? When you didn't check in, we followed your trail. Jimmy panted, reaching my side. This is Samuel Crow Feather. He insisted on coming when he heard where you'd gone. The old Cherokee man stepped forward, his weathered face grim in the fading light. He was carrying a leather bag and what looked like a bundle of herbs. You should not have come here alone, he said quietly. This is a thin place, a place where the world of spirits touches our world. Can you help them? I pointed to the Morgan family, who still sat motionless around the old foundation. Samuel knelt beside the father and placed his hand on the man's forehead. He spoke something in Cherokee, words that seemed to hang in the air like smoke. The man's eyes flickered and focused for a moment. They are caught between worlds, Samuel said. But the change is not complete. There is still time. A cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying voices that whispered in languages I didn't recognize. The Nunnehay were moving closer again, their pale forms visible between the twisted trees. They're coming back, Jimmy said, his voice tight with fear. I could see his hands shaking as he reached for his radio. We need backup. Radio won't work here, I told him. And backup couldn't get here in time anyway. Look. The sun had disappeared completely now. The only light came from our flashlights and the dying flare. And in that light, we could see dozens of pale figures emerging from the forest. The ritual must be completed by dawn, Samuel said, pulling items from his leather bag. If we can delay them until sunrise, the spirits will lose their power over these people. How long until dawn? Jimmy asked. I checked my watch, though the hands seemed to be moving wrong. Maybe 10 hours. Can we hold them off that long? Samuel was arranging tobacco and other herbs in a circle around the Morgan family. Not hold them off, drive them back. But I need time to complete the protection ritual. The Nunnehay leader stepped forward, and I could see him more clearly now. He was tall, maybe 8 feet, and his clothes shifted and changed as I watched. One you'd have sometimes Cherokee buckskin, sometimes a Confederate uniform, sometimes settler's homespun. His face was gaunt and pale, with eyes that held all the sadness and anger of a people driven from their homeland. "You cannot protect them, old man," he said to Samuel. "They came to our territory willingly. They are ours by right." "No one belongs to the spirits of the dead," Samuel replied, not looking up from his work. "These people have families who love them, lives to return to. As did we, once." The leader's voice carried centuries of pain. "Before we were driven from these mountains, before we were forgotten and left to fade away." I felt a stab of sympathy despite my fear. These weren't just monsters. They were people who had suffered, who had died, who had been lost and forgotten by history. "I understand your pain," I said, "but this isn't the way. Taking innocent families won't bring back what you lost." "Will it not?" The leader smiled, showing teeth that were too sharp and too white. "Every family we take makes us stronger, more real. Soon we will have enough power to reclaim what was stolen from us." The other Nunehai were forming a circle around us now, their numbers growing as more emerged from the darkness. Some looked like Cherokee warriors, others like Civil War soldiers, still others like pioneer families. All of them bore the pale, translucent look of the dead. "How many?" Jimmy whispered. "Too many," I replied, gripping my iron badge like a weapon. Samuel stood up from his ritual circle, tobacco smoke rising around him. "The protection is in place, but it will not hold long against so many spirits. Then we need to even the odds." I pulled out my pack and started distributing everything I had that might help. "Jimmy, you still carry that old Zippo your granddad gave you?" "Yeah, but what good is a lighter gonna do? It's not the flame, it's the metal. They don't like iron, remember?" I pulled out my camping gear. "Steel tent stakes, aluminum pots, anything metal, we make a stand here." But even as I spoke, I could feel the temperature dropping again. The Nunehai were drawing closer, and their presence seemed to suck the warmth right out of the air. My breath came out in puffs now, and frost was forming on the ground around us. Worse, I could feel that strange coldness spreading through my body again. Whatever they'd done to me when I entered their territory, it was getting stronger. "Bill," Jimmy said quietly, "your hair." I reached up and felt my hair. It was turning white, not gray, but pure white, like an old man's. "The transformation," Samuel said grimly. "It affects anyone who stays too long in their presence. You must leave. Now." "I'm not leaving these people." "Then we fight." The old Cherokee man reached into his bag and pulled out what looked like an old military knife. My grandfather's blade, iron and steel, blessed with tobacco smoke and eagle feathers. The Nunehai leader raised his hand, and all the pale figures stepped forward as one. "Enough. You will give us what is ours, or we will take you all." That's when I heard it, the sound of running water, getting louder and closer. At first I thought it might be the creek rising, but then I realized what was happening. "The beaver dam," I said. "Jimmy, you still got those road flares in your pack?" "3 or 4. "Why?" "There's a beaver dam about a quarter-mile upstream. These spirits are tied to this place, right? What happens if we flood it?" Samuel's eyes lit up with understanding. "Running water. It breaks their connection to the land. Can you hold them here for 10 minutes? The old man looked at the growing circle of pale figures and nodded grimly. "I can try." I grabbed 2 flares from Jimmy's pack and started toward the creek. The Nunehai moved to intercept me, but Samuel began chanting in Cherokee, and his voice seemed to push them back like a physical force. "Go!" he shouted. "Quickly!" I ran through the darkness, following the sound of water, stumbling over roots and rocks, but driven by pure desperation. Behind me, I could hear Samuel's voice rising and falling, and the angry whispers of the spirits as they pressed against whatever protection he'd created. The beaver dam was right where I remembered it, a solid wall of sticks and mud backing up the creek into a sizable pond. I pulled the pins on both flares and jammed them into the base of the dam, then started kicking and tearing at the structure with my bare hands. The dam gave way all at once. Water roared down into the hollow like a freight train, carrying everything in its path. I barely made it to high ground before the flood hit the clearing where we'd made our stand. The effect on the Nunehai was immediate and devastating. The moment the running water touched the old cabin foundation, they began to scream, "Ai Ti Nai," not with their voices, but with something deeper and more terrible. Their pale forms flickered like candle flames in the wind, growing fainter and more transparent. "What is happening to us?" the leader cried out, his form already starting to fade. "You are returning to the spirit world where you belong," Samuel called back, still maintaining his protective circle around the Morgan family. "This place is no longer yours." One by one, the spirits began to disappear, pulled away by forces I couldn't see or understand. Some went quietly, fading like morning mist. Others fought it, screaming their rage and pain into the night. The leader was the last to go. As the water swirled around his feet, he looked directly at me with those terrible reflecting eyes. "This is not over, Ranger. There are other thin places in these mountains, other families who will wander where they should not go." "Then I'll be watching for them," I said. He smiled one last time, that sharp-toothed grin that had haunted my nightmares ever since. "You are marked now. Part of you will always belong to us." Then he was gone, dissolved into the rushing water like he'd never existed at all. The flood receded quickly, draining away into the lower parts of the hollow. Samuel's protective circle had held. The Morgan family sat exactly where they'd been, but now they were stirring, blinking, looking around in confusion. "Where are we?" the father asked, his voice hoarse but human again. The terrible aging was already fading from his face. "You're safe," I told him. "We're getting you out of here." It took us 3 hours to hike them back to the trailhead, moving slow and careful in the darkness. The children didn't remember anything after leaving their car 3 days ago. The parents had vague memories of being lost, of cold and whispers in the night, but nothing clear. By the time we reached the parking area, the sun was coming up over the mountains. The Morgan family was taken to the hospital for observation, and the official report listed their condition as exposure and dehydration. Nobody mentioned the Nuneahi or the hollow or what had really happened down there. But I knew, and Samuel knew, and somewhere in the back of their minds, the Morgan family knew too. 6 months later, I got a letter from Mrs. Morgan. She said the family was doing well, had moved to a nice suburb outside Chicago, but she mentioned something strange. Both children had started speaking Cherokee fluently, even though they'd never learned it. And sometimes, on quiet nights, she could swear she heard the sound of running water even though they lived nowhere near a stream. As for me, my hair stayed white from that night forward. Pure white, like I'd aged 30 years and 30 minutes. The doctors said it was shock, but I knew better. The Nuneahi leader had been right. Part of me would always belong to them. I still work these mountains, still rescue lost hikers and campers. But now I pay attention to the old Cherokee warnings, the stories the mountain folk tell their children. I've learned which hollows to avoid, which trails lead to places where the spirits still walk. And sometimes, on nights when the moon is dark and the wind carries voices from the deep places, I remember that there are other thin places in these mountains, other families who might wander where they shouldn't go. When that happens, I check my gear, make sure my radio batteries are fresh, and head out into the darkness, because somebody has to watch. Somebody has to stand between the living and the hungry dead. My name is William Hawthorne. I'm a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains, and I've never lost anyone I was looking for. Not anymore. My name is Catherine Mountainheart, but everyone calls me Kate. I've been a ranger in the Monongahela National Forest for 12 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Broken bones, hypothermia, bear attacks, lost hikers, you name it. I've patched it up or carried it out. I learned how to handle trauma during my time as a nurse in Vietnam, and those skills served me well out here in the backcountry. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened at Widow's Peak in October of 1983. It started on a Tuesday morning when the call came through on my radio. A group of day hikers had found a young woman at the overlook, unresponsive. I grabbed my medical kit and headed up the trail, figuring it was probably exposure or maybe a diabetic emergency. The autumn colors were at their peak, the mountainside a riot of reds and golds, but there was something off about the air that morning. Too still, too quiet. I found her sitting on the ground near the cliff edge, staring at nothing. The hikers who'd called it in were standing about 20 feet back, like they were afraid to get too close. "She won't talk," one of them said. Won't move. We tried to help her, but... I knelt down next to the woman. She looked young, maybe 25, but something was wrong with her appearance. Her skin had this papery quality, like old tissue. Her hair was completely white. Miss, can you hear me? I touched her shoulder gently. She was ice cold. That's when she turned to look at me, and I almost fell backward. Her eyes were ancient. Not tired or sick, ancient, like she'd lived 100 years in those eyes. The mothers are calling their children home, she whispered. Her voice sounded like dried leaves scraping together. I checked her pulse. Strong and steady, pupils normal, no signs of head trauma or drug use. But her hands, God, her hands. The skin was wrinkled and spotted with age, the fingernails grown long and yellowed. I'd seen plenty of medical emergencies in my time, but I'd never seen someone age like this overnight. How long has she been here? I asked the hikers. We don't know. We found her like this, maybe 20 minutes ago. I radioed for a helicopter evacuation and wrapped the woman in a thermal blanket. While I waited, I noticed things about the overlook I'd never paid attention to before. The trees nearest the cliff edge were dying, their leaves brown and brittle, even though it was only mid-October. The ground felt colder here than it should, and there was this smell in the air, not bad exactly, but old. Like opening a trunk that's been sealed for decades. The woman kept muttering the same thing over and over. The mothers are calling their children home. When the helicopter finally arrived, it took 3 attempts to land. The pilot said his instruments kept going haywire, spinning like crazy whenever he got close to the peak. We finally got her loaded and off to the hospital in Charleston. I should have left right then. Should have hiked back down and written it off as some weird medical thing the doctors would figure out. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong with this place. I'd been coming to Widow's Peak for years. It was a popular overlook. Nothing special, but now it felt different. Watchful. I walked to the cliff edge and looked out over the valley. That's when I heard it for the first time. A sound like women crying, soft and distant, coming from somewhere in the forest below. I turned around, thinking maybe there were more hikers in distress, but the trail was empty. The crying continued. Not loud, but constant. Sad in a way that made my chest ache. I checked my watch. Still had a few hours of daylight. Against my better judgment, I started down a side trail that led toward the sound, following a narrow path I'd never noticed before. It wound between 2 rock formations and opened into a small clearing where the ground was covered in dead leaves, all arranged in perfect circles. The crying was louder here. I could almost make out words, names, maybe, being called out in desperate, pleading voices. But there was nobody there. Just empty forest and dying trees. That's when my radio crackled to life. Static at first, then a voice, a woman's voice, soft and sad. Sarah. Sarah, come home. Mama's waiting. I spun around, my heart hammering. The radio shouldn't pick up anything out here. We were 35 miles from the nearest town, too far for civilian broadcasts. Hello? I called out. Is someone there? The crying stopped. The forest went completely silent. No birds, no wind, nothing. Just that heavy, watching quiet. I got out of there fast, practically running back up to the main trail. My hands were shaking when I reached the parking area. I told myself it was just the altitude, or maybe low blood sugar. Anything but what it felt like, that something in those woods was waiting, watching, wanting. But I couldn't stop thinking about that young woman's face. Those ancient eyes, and the way she'd said those words, like she was delivering a message. That night, I got a call from the hospital. The woman had been identified 23-year-old Jennifer Morrison from Elkins. But the doctors were baffled. Every test they ran showed the physiology of a woman in her 70s. Cellular aging, bone density, hormone levels, all consistent with someone 50 years older than her actual age. They couldn't explain it. One night on that mountain, and half a century had been stolen from her body. And then came the other reports. 3 young women, all in their 20s, reported missing from surrounding counties over the past week. All of them had been hiking alone. All of them had last been seen heading toward trails in the Monongahela. I pulled out my old maps of the forest and spread them across my kitchen table. Started marking locations of missing persons reports from the past decade. A pattern emerged, a cluster of disappearances, all within a 10-mile radius of Widow's Peak. I'd heard the stories, of course. Local legends about the place. During the Civil War, It had been a gathering spot for widows who'd lost husbands and sons in the fighting. They'd come to the peak to mourn together, crying out their grief to the mountains. Some of the old-timers said you could still hear them on quiet nights. But those were just stories. Ghost tales to scare tourists, weren't they? I went back to Widow's Peak the next morning, told myself I was just doing a routine safety check, documenting any hazards. But really, I needed to understand what had happened to Jennifer Morrison. This time I brought a camera and a voice recorder. If something weird was happening up there, I wanted proof. The trail felt different in the morning light, colder. The usual sounds of the forest, birds chirping, squirrels rustling in the undergrowth, were absent. My boots crunched on frost-covered leaves, and my breath came out in white puffs, even though the temperature was supposed to be in the 50s. When I reached the overlook, I found something that made my stomach drop. Dozens of dead birds scattered around the rocks, not wounded or sick-looking, just dead, like they'd fallen from the sky mid-flight. Their bodies were cold and stiff, but they hadn't been there yesterday. I'd have noticed. I took photos, then set up my voice recorder on a flat rock and pressed record. October 21st, 1983. Ranger Mountain Heart conducting site investigation at Widow's Peak. Present conditions. Temperature approximately 40 degrees, clear skies, unusual bird mortality. A sound cut me off, the crying again, but closer this time. Coming from the morning cave I'd found yesterday. I grabbed my flashlight and recorder and headed down the side trail. The clearing with the circular leaf patterns was still there, but now there were more of them. 7 perfect circles, each about 6 feet across. And in the center of each circle, scratched into the dirt, was a name. Sarah, Elizabeth, Margaret, Rebecca, Catherine, Anne, Mary, Catherine, my name. My hands started shaking. I raised the camera and took pictures, the flash bright in the dim forest light. Through the viewfinder, I saw something that stopped my heart. Translucent figures standing at the edge of the clearing. Women in long dark dresses, their faces pale and sad. I lowered the camera. The figures were gone. Looked through the viewfinder again. There they were, clearer now. 5 of them, maybe 6, watching me with hollow eyes. "This isn't real," I whispered. "You're not real." But even as I said it, I felt something, a presence, warm and comforting, like being wrapped in a mother's embrace. And with it came a feeling of such overwhelming sadness that tears started running down my face without warning. The voice recorder in my pocket crackled. I pulled it out and hit playback. Static. Then, singing soft, beautiful singing in harmony. A lullaby I half remembered from childhood, but the words were wrong. Old words, in a dialect I didn't recognize. "Hush now, baby. Don't you cry. Mama's here to sing you. Close your eyes and rest your head, safe in Mama's arms. My sweet child." The singing faded into crying again, and then a voice clear as day on the recording. "We've been waiting for you, Catherine. Come home to us. Let us take care of you." I dropped the recorder like it had burned me. When I looked up, the translucent women were closer. I could see details now, the careful stitching on their mourning dresses, the tears on their cheeks, the desperate love in their eyes. One of them reached out toward me. Her hand passed through a tree branch like smoke, but when it got close to my skin, I felt it cold and gentle, like my mother's hand used to feel when she'd check for fever. I stumbled backward, tripped over a root, and fell hard. The impact knocked the wind out of me. When I looked up, gasping, the women were surrounding me in a circle. Their mouths moved in silent speech, and I could feel their words rather than hear them. Asterisk, lost children. Need to protect. Keep them safe. Love them. Asterisk, I'm not a child, I managed to say. I'm 34 years old. Asterisk, so young, so much pain. Let us help. Let us love you. Asterisk, one of them knelt beside me. I could see through her body to the dead leaves beneath and touched my hair. Where her fingers passed, I felt warmth spread through my skull. And with it came memories, flooding back so vivid it was like living them again. My mother braiding my hair before school, singing softly. My father teaching me to identify plants on mountain trails. My fiancé, Tom's last letter from Vietnam, telling me about the wedding we'd never have. The grief hit me like a physical blow. I'd buried those memories deep, locked them away where they couldn't hurt. But now they were right here, raw and fresh, and the crying women were crying with me, for me, sharing my pain. Asterisk, we understand. We lost our children too, our husbands, our sons. But you can be ours now. We'll keep you safe. Asterisk, I felt something changing in my body. A heaviness in my bones. My skin felt tight, like it was shrinking. I looked down at my hands and screamed. The skin was wrinkling before my eyes, age spots blooming like bruises. No, I shouted, scrambling to my feet. No, I don't want this. The women's faces twisted with confusion and hurt. One of them, the closest one, tilted her head like she was listening to something far away. Asterisk, why do you resist? We only want to love you, to protect you. Asterisk, this isn't love. I was backing away now, toward the trail. This is you're killing me. Asterisk, not killing. Saving. Bringing you home. Asterisk, I ran. Didn't look back, didn't stop, just ran as hard as I could up the trail. Behind me, I heard them calling not with words, but with pure emotion. Sadness, confusion, yearning, the sound of mothers watching their children run away. When I finally burst out of the tree line onto the main trail, the feeling lifted. My hands looked normal again, but I could still feel them out there, waiting in the forest, watching, wanting. I made it back to my truck and locked the doors, even though I knew locks wouldn't stop what I'd just seen. My camera and recorder were still in my pack. With shaking hands, I reviewed the photos. Every single one showed the women, clear as day, standing in circles, reaching out, their faces full of desperate maternal love. The recording was worse. Hours of it, lullabies, crying, names being called in, pleading voices, and underneath it all, a conversation between the spirits, talking about their lost children, about how long they'd been waiting, about how the young women who came to the peak reminded them of their daughters, gone to war and disease 100 years ago. They weren't trying to hurt anyone, they were trying to save them, protect them, love them. But their love was killing people. I drove straight to park headquarters and requested an emergency meeting with my supervisor. Spread the photos and audio recording across his desk. Told him everything. He listened, his face growing more concerned with each word. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Kate, he finally said, you've been through a lot. Vietnam, losing your fiancé, maybe this job, being alone out there so much. I'm not crazy, I interrupted. Look at the evidence. Listen to the recordings. He did, and I watched his face change as the lullabies played, as the crying filled his office. He stared at the photos of the translucent women for a long time. We need to bring in specialists, he said quietly. This is beyond park, service jurisdiction. By that afternoon, we had a team assembled. Dr. Maria Santos, a psychologist who specialized in mass trauma events. Dr. James Patterson, a medical examiner from Charleston, who'd been studying Jennifer Morrison's case. Tom Bradley, our search and rescue coordinator. And Rebecca Crow Mother, a Cherokee elder who'd served as a cultural consultant for the Park Service for 20 years. We met in the conference room. I laid out everything, the recordings, the photos, the pattern of disappearances, Jennifer Morrison's impossible aging. The room was silent when I finished. Rebecca spoke first. My grandmother told me stories about that place. She called it Where the Mothers Weep. Said it was sacred ground, but also dangerous. After the war, your Civil War, Cherokee women went there too. It became a gathering place for all mothers who'd lost children. The grief was so strong, it left a mark on the land itself. You're saying this is some kind of spiritual phenomenon? Dr. Patterson looked skeptical. I'm saying that grief, when it's strong enough and shared by enough people, can change a place. Make it hungry for what it lost. Dr. Santos leaned forward. The psychological profile fits. These entities, whatever they are, they're demonstrating attachment behavior. Maternal bonding attempts. They're not malicious. They're trying to nurture, to protect. By aging people to death, I said, they may not understand what they're doing. To them, the aging process might seem like protection, like keeping their adopted daughters safe by moving them through life quickly, past all the dangers of youth. Tom Bradley cleared his throat. We've got 3 women still missing. If what you're saying is true, they could be up there right now, undergoing this process. That's when my radio crackled. Ranger Mountain Heart, we've got a situation. Multiple hikers reporting strange activity at Widow's Peak. Women's clothing found, abandoned near the overlook. No sign of the hikers themselves. We mobilized immediately. 5 of us piled into 2 trucks and headed up the mountain road. The sun was setting, painting the sky blood red. As we climbed higher, the temperature dropped fast. Frost formed on the windshield, even though it was only 6 p.m. We parked and hiked in together, flashlights cutting through the gathering dark. The forest was completely silent. No insects, no wind, nothing. At the overlook, we found 3 backpacks and piles of clothing arranged in neat circles. Running shoes, jeans, t-shirts, all empty, as if their owners had simply vanished out of them. "They're in the morning cave," I said. "That's where the spirits are strongest." Rebecca nodded. "We need to go to them, tonight. If we wait until morning, those women will be lost forever." Dr. Patterson checked his medical kit. "If this is really happening, if these spirits are causing accelerated cellular aging, there may not be anything I can do to reverse it." "But we have to try," Dr. Santos said. She looked at me. "Kate, you've made contact with them. They responded to you. You might be the only one who can reach them." My hands were shaking. I remembered the feeling of aging, my skin wrinkling and tightening, the warmth of their touch that promised comfort but delivered death. "They think they're helping," I said slowly. "They think they're saving these women from pain. We need to make them understand that they're not." We started down the side trail to the morning cave. Our flashlights barely penetrated the darkness, and the temperature kept dropping until I could see everyone's breath in white clouds. The clearing was full of them now, dozens of translucent women in morning dress, arranged in circles. And in the center, alive but changing, were 3 young women. I recognized one of them from a missing persons report, Sarah Kendrick, age 26. Her hair was streaked with white. Her skin was beginning to wrinkle. The spirits were singing to them, those haunting lullabies in old Appalachian dialect. The missing women sat still, eyes half closed, peaceful expressions on their aging faces. "Sarah!" Tom shouted. "Sarah Kendrick!" One of the women looked up, confused. She tried to stand but stumbled. A spirit rushed to her side, steadying her with translucent hands. The touch made Sarah gasp, and I saw more white spread through her hair. "We have to stop this now," Dr. Patterson said, stepping forward. The spirits turned toward us as one. Their faces showed no anger, only concern. One of them, the same one who'd touched me before, floated forward. "Asterisk, why do you disturb us? These children are hurt. They need our love." Asterisk, I stepped in front of the others. "They need medical help. Real help. You're killing them with your love." Asterisk, "No. We're saving them. Keeping them from pain." Asterisk, "Look at them." I pointed to Sarah, whose hands were now gnarled with age. "You're taking their lives away. They're dying." The spirit looked back at the 3 women. For the first time, something like doubt crossed her translucent face. Asterisk, "But we've lost so much. Our babies, our husbands. We only want to protect them, to keep them safe, as we couldn't keep our own children safe." Asterisk, Rebecca stepped forward and began speaking in Cherokee, her voice rising and falling in ritual cadence. The spirits turned toward her, listening. Some of them began to cry harder. "What's she saying?" Dr. Santos whispered to me. "She's honoring their sacrifice, telling them their grief is seen and respected. But she's also telling them that their love has become a trap, that true love means letting go." The spirits were agitated now, swirling around the clearing like leaves in a storm. Their crying grew louder, more desperate. I felt their anguish in my chest, the unbearable pain of mothers who'd lost everything, who'd been waiting for over a century to have someone to love again. One of the spirits, an older one, with kind eyes, approached me. She touched my face, and I felt her memories flood into me. Her name was Margaret. She'd lost 3 sons to the war and a daughter to fever. She'd come to this peak to die of grief, and instead, she'd become trapped in it, trapped with all the other grieving mothers, forever seeking the children they'd lost. Asterisk, "Help us," asterisk, Margaret whispered directly into my mind. Asterisk, "We're tired of crying, we want to rest. But we can't leave our children alone." Asterisk, I understood then. They couldn't let go because they'd never been properly mourned, never been honored for their sacrifice. They'd been forgotten, their grief dismissed as simply what women did during war. "Rebecca," I said, "can you perform a release ceremony, something to honor them and let them rest?" She nodded. "But it will require a sacrifice." Someone who understands their pain, who can bridge the gap between their world and ours. Everyone looked at me. I'd lost too. Not children, but a man I'd loved, a future I'd planned. I understood grief that didn't heal, pain that became a part of you. I'll do it, I said. Rebecca began gathering materials for the ceremony: stones from the clearing, branches from the dying trees, earth from the circles where the spirits appeared. The team worked to stabilize the 3 missing women, wrapping them in thermal blankets and trying to slow whatever process was stealing their youth. But the spirits were growing more agitated. They swirled around us, their crying reaching a fever pitch. More of them were appearing, drawn by the disturbance. I counted at least 40 now, maybe 50. All of them reaching out, seeking comfort, desperate for connection. Asterisk. Don't take our children away. Asterisk, they pleaded. Asterisk. We've been alone so long. Please don't leave us alone again. Asterisk. Rebecca worked quickly, arranging the materials in a pattern I didn't recognize. She motioned for me to stand in the center. You'll be the bridge, she said quietly. You'll carry their grief and help them understand that they can rest. But Kate, this won't be easy. You'll feel everything they've felt, all of it at once. Will it kill me? It might. I looked at the 3 women lying on the ground, aging before our eyes. At Tom and Dr. Patterson, desperately trying to save them. At the spirits, so desperate and alone after more than a century of waiting. Let's do it, Rebecca began to sing. Her voice rose high and clear, a Cherokee morning song that seemed to resonate with the bones of the mountain itself. The spirits grew quiet, listening. I stood in the center of her pattern and opened myself to their presence. They came all at once. The grief hit like a tidal wave, overwhelming, crushing, absolute. I felt every loss, every goodbye, every child buried, every husband who never came home. Decades of accumulated pain compressed into single moments. My knees buckled, but I forced myself to stay standing. Asterisk, we see you. Asterisk, I called out to them, not with my voice but with something deeper. Asterisk, we honor your sacrifice. We remember your children. Asterisk. The spirits pressed closer, their translucent forms overlapping with mine. I could feel them trying to merge with me, seeking comfort in living flesh. My skin began to wrinkle. My hair turned white. Age spots bloomed on my hands, but I didn't fight it. Instead, I opened my arms. I see you, Margaret, I said aloud, speaking to the spirit who'd touched me. Your sons died bravely. Your daughter is at peace. You loved them so well. Margaret's crying grew softer. I see you, Elizabeth. Your husband gave everything for a cause he believed in. You waited for him with such hope. I see you, Sarah. Rebecca. Catherine. Anne. Mary. All of you. Every mother who came to this peak to mourn. Your grief matters. Your love matters. You're not forgotten. The aging process accelerated. I was 70 now, 80. My bones ached, my vision blurred. But I kept speaking, naming them, honoring them, giving them what they'd been seeking for over a century: recognition. Rebecca's singing grew louder, and she switched to English. Mothers of sorrow, mothers of loss, your vigil is ended, your burden will cross. Rest now in peace. Your children are free. Your love lives eternal in mountain and tree. The spirits began to glow brighter. The crying changed. It was still sad, but there was relief in it now. Release. Doctor. Santos stepped forward. We'll build a memorial here, she called out. A place where people can come to remember you, where your names will be spoken and your sacrifice honored. You won't be forgotten. The glowing intensified. I felt the spirits beginning to let go, their desperate grip loosening. But they were still afraid. Asterisk. What about our children? Asterisk, Margaret asked. Asterisk. Who will protect them? Asterisk. They'll protect themselves, I said, my voice cracking with age. You raised them strong. You loved them enough. Now you have to trust that your love was enough to carry them through. For a long moment, nothing happened. The spirits hovered, uncertain. Then, one by one, they began to fade. But not all of them. Some remained, including Margaret. She floated close to me, her translucent hand resting on my weathered cheek. Asterisk. One last thing, asterisk, she said. Asterisk. Let us give you a gift. You've carried our grief, let us share our love. Asterisk. Before I could respond, she pressed her hand to my chest. Warmth flooded through me, not the terrible heat of aging, but something else, something pure. I felt my own grief begin to shift, to soften. The pain of losing Tom, the trauma from Vietnam, the loneliness I'd carried for so long, it was still there, but it didn't hurt the same way. It felt like someone had helped me carry it. The spirits who remained touched me one by one, each adding their gift. And as they did, they were giving me what they'd learned in a century of mourning. The ability to carry grief without being destroyed by it. The power to heal others by honoring their pain. When the last spirit touched me, they all finally faded. The clearing grew silent, empty. I collapsed. I woke up 3 days later in the Charleston hospital. My first thought was that I'd be ancient, withered, dying. But when I looked at my hands, they were different. Older than they'd been, I looked about 45 now instead of 34, but not destroyed. The aging had stopped. Somehow, it had reversed partially when the spirits released me. Dr. Patterson was sitting by my bed. "You're awake. Good. You've had quite a few visitors." "The missing women?" "Stabilized. Sarah Kendrick looks about 40 now, but she's alive and healthy. The other two are similar. Whatever process those spirits started, it stopped when you completed that ceremony." I sat up slowly. Everything ached, but in a way that felt almost good, like I'd been carrying a heavy weight for years and finally put it down. "Rebecca?" "She's fine. Already started organizing the memorial project. She's been working with Cherokee Nation representatives and the Park Service. They're going to create a proper monument at Widow's Peak, something to honor all the women who mourned there." Over the next few weeks, I learned the full scope of what had happened. The 3 women we'd rescued had partial memory of their experience. They described it as feeling loved, protected, but also trapped, like being smothered by affection. They were getting counseling, learning to cope with their new older bodies. Jennifer Morrison, the first victim I'd found, had stabilized too. She'd aged to about 65 and would stay that way. The doctors couldn't explain it. They'd written papers about it, calling it acute supernatural cellular acceleration, but nobody really understood, except me, and Rebecca, and the others who'd been there that night. The Park Service wanted to close Widow's Peak permanently, but Rebecca convinced them otherwise. "This is sacred ground," she argued. "It needs to be protected, honored, but not sealed away. The spirits have found peace, but their story needs to be told." So they built the memorial, a beautiful stone structure with plaques bearing the names of every woman and child lost during the Civil War in that region. Rebecca performed a dedication ceremony, and I swear I felt them there, the spirits watching, approving, finally at rest. But something had changed in me. The gift the spirits gave me was real. I found I could sense grief in others, could feel their pain, and help them carry it. My medical work improved because I understood my patients in a way I never had before. It was like having a sixth sense for emotional wounds. Dr. Santos called it empathic enhancement. The Government Medical Research Division called it something else, supernatural psychological integration, and wanted to study me. I declined. Some things aren't meant to be dissected and explained. I still work at Monongahela, still hike the trails and help lost hikers. But now I also spend time at the memorial, talking to visitors, sharing the story, helping people honor their own grief. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I can hear them, the spirits, still present but peaceful now. They don't call out anymore. Don't seek to adopt or protect. They just watch over the mountain, their vigil finally transformed from desperate need into gentle guardianship. I'm 45 years old in a 34-year-old ranger's career. My hair is streaked with white that won't wash out. I have wrinkles I didn't earn through time, but I'm not angry about it. Those 11 stolen years bought peace for dozens of spirits and saved 3 women's lives. Fair trade. Last month, Rebecca told me about similar reports from other Civil War sites throughout Appalachia. Other places where grief soaked into the land and never left. Other spirits still waiting, still mourning, still seeking comfort. Someone should help them, she said, looking at me meaningfully. I thought about it. About spending my career not just healing physical wounds, but spiritual ones too. About using this strange gift the spirits gave me to bring peace to other places haunted by grief. "Yeah," I finally said. "Someone should. The mountains are full of ghosts. Most of them just want to be seen, to be remembered, to know their love mattered. I can do that now. I can help them rest. It's a good purpose for a nurse who came back from war, for a ranger who thought she'd seen everything. Turns out, I'd seen nothing at all. But now I see them clearly, the mothers, the widows, the grieving, and I honor them. And in honoring them, I've learned to honor my own grief too. To carry it without being crushed by it. Tom would have liked that, my mama too. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone at my ranger station, I hear them singing. Those same lullabies the spirits sang, but peaceful now, comforting. And I sing along, my voice joining theirs across the distance between life and death, carrying the melody forward into whatever comes next. The wailing has stopped at Widow's Peak, but the love remains. And that, I've learned, is what matters most. My name is Daniel Wolfhart, and I've been a park ranger for 11 years. In all that time, I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. Bears, wildcats, lost hikers, even the occasional poacher. But nothing prepared me for what I found at Cranberry Glades in November of 1974. The call came in on a Tuesday morning while I was checking my gear. Static crackled through the radio before Jim's voice cut through. "Dan, we got a situation at the bog. Hunting party went missing 3 days ago. Need you to take a look." I knew the area well. Cranberry Glades sits 50 miles from the nearest road, a maze of acidic bogs and thick spruce forest that most folks avoid. The Cherokee who lived here before white settlers came called it the place where spirits hunt. Even now, the local Cherokee won't go near it during hunting season. Growing up with my Cherokee grandmother after my parents died, I'd heard the stories, but 11 years in these woods, plus my time in Vietnam with special forces, taught me that most mysteries have simple answers. Rabid animals, hunters getting turned around, maybe someone falling through thin ice. Nothing a good tracker couldn't figure out. The hike to their last known camp took me 4 hours through thick forest. The November air bit at my face, and frost crunched under my boots. Everything seemed normal until I reached the clearing where they'd set up. The camp looked like a bomb had gone off. 8 tents were shredded to ribbons. Sleeping bags hung from tree branches 20 feet up. A massive oak tree had claw marks carved deep into its bark, hame, but these marks went 15 feet high. No bear could reach that far, even standing on its back legs. But the rifles bothered me most. All 8 hunting rifles were twisted into spirals, like someone had heated the metal and wound it up like rope. The barrels pointed toward the bog in perfect formation, as if they were warning signs. I found their cassette player half buried under torn fabric. The tape was still running. When I hit rewind and played it back, I heard normal camp sounds, men talking, laughing, someone strumming a guitar. Then the voices stopped. In the silence, I heard something that made my skin crawl, howling. But not like any wolf I'd ever heard. This was deeper, more musical, like voices singing in harmony, and underneath it, I could swear I heard drum beats. I clicked off the recorder and looked around the destroyed camp. 8 experienced hunters don't just vanish, and whatever did this had strength I couldn't explain. The tracks leading away from camp started normal enough, boot prints heading toward the bog. But after 50 yards, something changed. The boot prints got deeper, longer. Then I found something that made me stop cold. In a patch of soft mud, I saw a clear print that started as a boot heel but ended as a wolf's paw, like someone had changed shape mid-step. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. "The spirits of old warriors never rest, Danny. They hunt in the spaces between worlds." I'd always figured those were just stories. But staring at that impossible footprint, I started to wonder if there were things in these mountains that my army training never prepared me for. The bog stretched out in front of me, covered in thick mist, even though the day was clear everywhere else. The air smelled wrong, not just the usual acid smell of bog water, but something else. Something that reminded me of gunpowder and old blood. I checked my radio, but got nothing but static. My compass spun like a broken toy. Even my watch had stopped working. As I stood at the edge of that ancient bog, I felt eyes watching me from the mist. Not animal eyes, something smarter. Something that knew I was there and was deciding what to do about it. The smart thing would have been to head back, call for backup, wait for daylight. But 8 men were missing, and I was the only one who might find them alive. I stepped into the bog, and the mist closed around me like a trap. The bog felt wrong from the moment I stepped onto the spongy ground. After 11 years in these mountains, I knew how wilderness was supposed to sound. Birds calling, insects buzzing, small animals moving through brush. But here, nothing. Just my boots squelching in the acidic water and the sound of my own breathing. The missing hunter's trail was easy to follow at first. 8 men leave plenty of sign, especially when they're moving fast. But the deeper I went into the bog, the stranger things got. The trail split into different paths that made no sense. Sometimes I'd follow boot prints that suddenly became paw prints the size of dinner plates. Other times, the tracks would just stop, like whoever made them had vanished into thin air. I found the first body near a stand of dead spruce trees. Tom Bradley, according to his hunting license. He'd been with the group from Wheeling, guys who came up every November for deer season. But Tom wasn't killed by any deer. He was hanging upside down from a tree branch, 12 feet off the ground, strung up like game after a hunt. His rifle lay beneath him, bent into a perfect circle. But what really got to me were his eyes, wide open, staring at the bog like he'd seen something that scared him to death. No rope, no signs of a struggle. Just a 200-pound man hung from a tree like a Christmas ornament. I cut him down and checked the body. No wounds I could see, no broken bones. His heart had just stopped, but his face was locked in an expression of pure terror. While I worked, I felt that watching sensation again. I'd learned to trust that feeling in Vietnam. It had kept me alive more than once. Something was out there in the mist, studying me. I started following the next set of tracks, moving slower now, checking behind me every few steps. The bog seemed to go on forever, a maze of water, channels and moss-covered islands. My map showed it as maybe 2 square miles, but I'd been walking for hours and hadn't reached the far side. That's when I heard the first howl. It came from somewhere ahead of me, long and mournful like a wolf calling to its pack. But there was something human about it too, like someone singing a sad song in a language I didn't know. 3 more howls answered from different directions. Then 3 more. Soon the whole bog echoed with voices that sounded like wolves but felt like people. I found the second body on a small island in the middle of a dark pool. Jerry Kowalski, also from the Wheeling group. He was arranged sitting up against a tree, his hands folded in his lap like he was praying. His rifle was planted in the ground next to him, barrel down, like a grave marker. But Jerry's eyes were gone. Not torn out or damaged, just gone, like they'd never been there. Empty sockets stared at the bog while his mouth hung open in a silent scream. The howling was getting closer now, coming from all sides. I could hear movement in the mist, heavy footsteps that didn't match any animal I knew. Sometimes they sounded like boots splashing through water. Sometimes like paws padding on solid ground. I tried my radio again. Nothing but static, and underneath it, what sounded like whispered voices speaking Cherokee. Words my grandmother had taught me, but I'd mostly forgotten. Warriors, hunt, spirits, walk. My hands were shaking as I checked my rifle. 6 rounds left. Not that bullets had done the hunting party much good. The third body was different. Mike Petrosky hung from another tree, but this time I could see how he got there. Claw marks in the bark showed something had climbed up, carrying him. The claws were huge, bigger than any bear, bigger than any cat, and they'd gouged the wood in patterns that looked almost like writing. I stared at those marks, trying to make sense of them, when I realized what I was seeing. Cherokee symbols. War paint designs my grandmother had shown me in old books. The howling stopped. Complete silence fell over the bog like a heavy blanket. Not even the water made noise anymore. That's when I saw them. Shapes moving through the mist. Too big to be wolves, too low to be men. They circled me at a distance, staying just at the edge of vision. When I turned toward one, it would fade back into the fog. But I could see their eyes, red like hot coals, watching me with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. 7 shapes. 7 bodies still missing from the hunting party. I backed toward the tree where Mike hung, keeping my rifle ready. The shapes moved closer, and I caught glimpses of what they really were. Wolves, but wrong. Too big, walking sometimes on 4 legs, sometimes on 2. Their fur looked like it was made of mist and shadow. And their faces looked human, like men wearing wolf masks or wolves wearing human expressions. One of them stepped into a patch of clearer air, and I got my first good look. It stood 7 feet tall on its hind legs, covered in dark fur that seemed to move even when there was no wind. Its hands ended in claws as long as kitchen knives. But its eyes were the worst part. Human eyes full of pain and rage and something that might have been sadness. It opened its mouth and spoke. Not howled. Spoke. You smell of war. The voice was like gravel and wind, barely human, but definitely words. It tilted its head, studying me like I was a puzzle it was trying to solve. You know the old ways. More shapes emerged from the mist. 7 wolf things, each one unique but all carrying the same aura of wrongness. They moved like a military unit, coordinated and disciplined. Like a pack, but also like a squad. We hunt those who bring death to sacred ground. The leader stepped closer, and I saw war paint on its face, red and black stripes that seemed to glow in the dim light. Cherokee war paint. My grandmother's stories came flooding back. Warriors who died in battle, their spirits trapped between worlds, hunting forever in the spaces where the living and dead touched. But these weren't just any warriors. They were Cherokee, killed defending their land, turned into something between wolf and man by their rage and pain. And they thought I was just another hunter bringing violence to their sacred bog. The pack leader circled me slowly, and I finally understood what I was dealing with. These weren't just animals or spirits. They were Cherokee warriors, transformed by death and rage into something between wolf and human. And they were hunting. I'm not here to hunt, I said, keeping my voice steady. I'm looking for the missing men. The wolf thing that had spoken cocked its head. Missing? They brought guns, brought death energy to sacred hunting ground. It gestured toward the trees where I'd found the bodies. They became what they brought. Hunters. Hunted. The other 6 spread out in a perfect circle around me. Military precision, even in their transformed state. These had been warriors in life, and death hadn't changed their tactics. My grandmother was Cherokee, I said, hoping it might matter. Rosa Wolfhart, she taught me the old stories. The leader paused. Its red eyes studied my face, and for a moment, something almost human flickered there. Wolfhart, yes, we remember. Her grandmother, healing woman. Why does her blood carry weapons into sacred space? Before I could answer, new sounds echoed across the bog. Voices, human voices, calling to each other through the mist. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. Another hunting party was entering the bog. The wolf spirits heard it too. Their heads snapped toward the sound, and their lips pulled back in snarls that showed teeth like white knives. The leader's eyes blazed brighter. More hunters, more death energy. The hungry time begins. They melted back into the mist like they'd never been there. But I could feel them moving, spreading out to surround the new arrivals. 7 supernatural predators with the tactical knowledge of experienced warriors. I had to warn them. I ran toward the voices, splashing through bog water that seemed to grab at my boots. Behind me, the howling started again, but now it sounded like a war cry. The new party was 5 men from Beckley, out for a weekend hunt. I found them setting up camp on a raised patch of ground, completely unaware they were walking into a nightmare. "Get out!" I shouted as I crashed through the brush. "Get out now!" They spun around, rifles coming up. Their leader, a heavy-set man with a gray beard, lowered his gun when he saw my ranger uniform. "What's the problem, Ranger?" "There's something in this bog that's killed 8 men. We need to leave immediately." Graybeard laughed. "Come on, what is it, bear? We can handle a bear." That's when the howling started again. But this time it came from all around us, a coordinated sound that rose and fell like a battle song. The 5 hunters looked around nervously as the mist began to thicken. "That's not a bear," one of them whispered. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Our breath came out in white puffs, and frost began forming on the trees around us. The bog water started to freeze in perfect circles that spread outward like ripples. Through the mist, red eyes appeared. Lots of them. "Form a circle," I ordered, falling back on military training. "Watch each other's backs." The hunters were too scared to argue. We stood back to back in a tight group while shapes moved through the fog around us. Sometimes I saw them clearly, massive wolf-like forms with human intelligence and Cherokee war paint. Sometimes they were just shadows and glowing eyes. What are they? Graybeard's voice cracked. Cherokee warriors, I said. Spirits trapped in this bog. They think we're here to hunt on sacred ground. One of the younger hunters, barely out of his teens, started praying. The Latin words seemed to make the wolf spirits angry. Their howling got louder, more aggressive. That's when they attacked. The first one came out of the mist like a freight train. 7 feet of muscle and fur and claws, moving faster than anything that size should move. It hit Graybeard before he could raise his rifle, claws raking across his chest. The man screamed and went down. His rifle fired into the air as he fell, the bullet disappearing into the fog. I put 3 rounds into the creature's chest. The bullets passed right through it like it was made of smoke. It turned toward me, and I saw Graybeard's blood on its claws. Iron cannot harm. Spirit warriors, it growled. We are beyond your weapons. The other hunters were firing wildly now, bullets flying in all directions. But the wolf spirits moved like ghosts, solid enough to kill, but too ethereal to be killed. A second creature appeared behind the young hunter who'd been praying. Its claws opened his throat in one smooth motion. He dropped to his knees, blood pumping out between his fingers, and fell face first into the bog water. The remaining 3 hunters broke and ran in different directions. Big mistake. The pack had been waiting for that. I heard screams from the mist as the creatures hunted them down one by one. These weren't mindless monsters. They worked together, herding their prey, cutting off escape routes. Warriors fighting as a unit, even in death. I was alone again, surrounded by 7 supernatural predators who could phase between solid and spirit at will. My rifle was useless, my radio dead, and I was 50 miles from help. The pack leader emerged from the fog, Graybeard's blood still dripping from its claws. You are different, it said, studying me. War scars, but not the scars of a hunter. These are warrior scars. It was right. The scars on my arms and chest came from Vietnam, from fighting for my country and my brothers in arms, not from killing animals for sport. I fought in Vietnam, I said. Special forces. I know what it means to be a warrior. The creature nodded slowly. We smell. The jungle wore on you. We smell. Death that was necessary. Not death for pleasure. The other 6 gathered around us, their red eyes fixed on my face. I could feel them reading me somehow, seeing the memories I tried to keep buried. Firefights in the jungle, friends dying in my arms, the weight of survival when good men didn't make it home. You understand. The warrior's burden, the leader said. Why do you walk with those who bring sport, death, to sacred ground? Because it's my job to protect people, even from things they don't understand. The wolf spirit was quiet for a long moment. The mist swirled around us, and I caught glimpses of other shapes in the fog, more spirits, Cherokee warriors from battles fought centuries ago, watching to see what their transformed brothers would do. The hunters brought violence, awakened us from the long sleep. Full moon rises tomorrow night. If violence continues, we cannot return to the spirit world. We will walk the earth, forever hungry. I was starting to understand. These weren't evil spirits. They were warriors trapped by their own protective instincts. The bog was sacred Cherokee ground, and they were bound to defend it. But the more violence that happened here, the stronger they became, and the harder it would be for them to find peace. What do you need? I asked. The pack leader's eyes blazed brighter. Honor. Recognition of our sacrifice. Remembrance of our deaths in defense of this sacred ground. And if I can't give you that, all 7 creatures stepped closer, and their growls filled the air like distant thunder. Then tomorrow night, when the moon is full, we hunt, not just the bog. We hunt the world of the living. I spent the night alone in the bog, surrounded by the spirits of Cherokee warriors while they told me their story. It wasn't a story you'd find in any history book. 200 years ago, this bog had been a place of power for the Cherokee. Warriors came here to speak with the spirits of their ancestors before battle. The acidic water and unique plants made it a doorway between the world of the living and the world of the dead. When white settlers pushed into Cherokee land, a group of warriors made their last stand here. 7 brothers from the Wolf clan, led by a war chief named Stands Like Mountain. They held off a much larger force for 3 days, fighting to protect the sacred space and give their families time to escape. All 7 died here, their blood mixing with the bog water. But their spirits couldn't rest. They were bound to protect this sacred ground forever, trapped between worlds by their own sense of duty. For most of the past 2 centuries, they'd slept in the spirit realm. The bog remained peaceful, avoided by locals who knew the old stories. But in recent years, hunting parties had started coming here more often. The violence they brought, the killing energy, the aggressive emotions, that woke the warrior spirits from their long sleep. And once awoken, they couldn't help but defend their territory. The pack leader, who had been Stands Like Mountain in life, explained it to me as we sat by the dark water under a canopy of stars. Each death, each killing, makes us stronger, but more trapped. We become more wolf, less man. Soon we will not remember who we were, only the need to hunt. I looked around at the other 6. In the starlight, I could see they were already changing. Their eyes were more animal than human. Now, their movements more predatory than military. Tomorrow is the full moon, I said. What happens then? The barrier weakens, if we are still bound by violence. We break free. Hunt beyond the sacred ground. All who carry violence in their hearts become our prey. That would be thousands of people. Anyone who'd ever felt anger, anyone who'd ever fought, anyone who'd ever been to war. Like me, there has to be another way, I said. Stands Like Mountain was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was sadder than before. In the old days, when warriors died, the people would sing them home, honor their sacrifice, help their spirits, find peace. A ceremony, the night way, sung for 4 nights, under the full moon. But it requires a singer who knows the old words and sacred tobacco to open the path between worlds. I thought of my grandmother, who'd taught me fragments of Cherokee prayers and songs. Not enough to perform a full ceremony, but maybe enough to start one. What about Joseph Crowwing? I asked. He's an elder, knows the old ways. The wolf spirit's eyes flared with hope. Crowwing still lives? He was, young warrior, when we died. If he remembers the songs. He lives on the reservation, about 60 miles from here, if I can get to him. No time. Stands Like Mountain growled. Moon rises. In 6 hours, already we feel the change beginning. Around us, the other 6 spirits were pacing restlessly. Their forms seemed less stable, flickering between wolf and human shapes. One of them was starting to look more like a real wolf than a spirit warrior. The tobacco, I said. Where can I find sacred tobacco? Must be freely given by one who honors our sacrifice. Cannot be taken or bought. Must be to offering of respect. I thought about that. Sacred tobacco wasn't something you could pick up at a store. It had to come from someone who understood its spiritual significance, someone who knew the Cherokee ways. Then I remembered something. In my truck, parked at the trailhead, I had a small pouch my grandmother had given me before she died. Sacred tobacco she'd grown herself, blessed in the old way, meant to be used for prayers. I have tobacco, I said. My grandmother's. She said to use it when I needed to speak to the spirits. Stands Like Mountain stared at me with those burning red eyes. Rosa Wolfheart's sacred tobacco? Yes, that would open the path. But I don't know all the songs. I can't perform the ceremony alone. You are her blood. You carry warrior spirit. Speak from the heart. Honor our sacrifice. Help our spirits. Remember who we were. The eastern sky was starting to lighten. Dawn was coming, and with it, the final day before the full moon would trap these spirits in their wolf forms forever. I stood up, feeling the weight of what I had to do. 7 Cherokee warriors were counting on me to help them find peace. If I failed, they'd become permanent predators, hunting the living world forever. I'll need to get to my truck, I said. Get the tobacco and try to contact Joseph Crowwing. We will protect you, guide you through the bog. But hurry. We feel ourselves changing. The journey back through the bog was like nothing I'd ever experienced. The 7 wolf spirits moved around me like an honor guard, their forms flickering between warrior and beast. They knew every path, every safe route through the treacherous water and hidden sinkholes. As we traveled, I could feel their struggle. They were fighting to hold on to their humanity, to remember who they'd been in life. Sometimes one would stumble and drop to all fours, looking more like a real wolf than a person. The others would help him up, remind him of his name, keep him focused on their mission. By the time we reached the edge of the bog, the sun was profligate, fully up. The spirits began to fade in the daylight, but I could still feel their presence. Tonight, Stands Like Mountain whispered, his voice barely audible. When the moon rises full, be ready. Then they were gone, melted back into the mist like they'd never been there. I ran for my truck, hoping I wasn't too late to save them, and everyone else they might hunt if I failed. I reached Joseph Crowwing just as the sun was setting. The old Cherokee elder listened to my story without interruption, his weathered face grave in the lamplight of his small house. I remember them, he said when I finished. Stands Like Mountain and his brothers. My grandfather told me stories. Brave warriors died protecting the sacred place. Can you help them? Do you know the Nightway ceremony? Crowwing was quiet for a long time, staring into the fire burning in his fireplace. Outside, the moon was beginning to rise, huge and silver and full. I know fragments. Some songs my grandfather taught me, but the full ceremony, that knowledge died with the old ones. My heart sank. Then we can't help them? The elder stood and walked to an old wooden chest in the corner. From it, he pulled a bundle wrapped in deerskin, a pipe, eagle feathers, and other sacred objects. We can try, he said. Sometimes, the spirits help those who honor them with pure hearts. Your grandmother's tobacco, my grandfather's songs. Maybe it will be enough. We drove back to the bog in his old pickup truck, the sacred items between us on the seat. As we got closer to the trailhead, the temperature began to drop. Frost formed on the windshield, even though it was only October. They're waking up, Crowwing said. The full moon calls to them. We parked and hiked into the bog by moonlight. I led the way to the small island where I'd spoken with Stands Like Mountain the night before. The mist was thicker now, glowing silver in the moonlight, and I could hear movement in the darkness around us. Red eyes appeared in the fog. 7 pairs, watching us approach. They're here, I whispered. Crowwing nodded and began unpacking his bundle. He built a small fire on the island and arranged the sacred objects around it. Then he looked at me. The tobacco, he said. I opened my grandmother's pouch with shaking hands. The tobacco inside was dark and fragrant, carefully prepared according to old traditions. As I sprinkled it on the fire, sweet smoke rose into the night air. The wolf spirits moved closer, drawn by the scent. In the firelight, I could see they were more wolf than human now. Massive creatures with glowing eyes and 2 smart faces. But when the tobacco smoke reached them, something changed. For a moment, I saw them as they'd been in life. 7 Cherokee warriors in traditional dress, proud and strong and human. Crowwing began to sing in Cherokee, his voice old but still powerful. Words I didn't understand but somehow felt in my bones. Songs of honor and sacrifice, of warriors who gave everything to protect what they loved. The spirits began to howl along with his singing, not the threatening howls I'd heard before, but something mournful and beautiful, like a funeral song. Speak to them, Crowwing said between verses. Tell them they're remembered. Tell them their sacrifice was honored. I stepped closer to the fire, looking at each spirit in turn. Stands Like Mountain, warriors of the Wolf Clan. I see you. I remember your sacrifice. The largest spirit, their leader, stepped into the firelight. He was still mostly wolf, but his eyes were human again. We remember now, he said, his voice clearer than before. We were warriors. We died, protecting our people. Your people survived because of your sacrifice, I told him. Your families escaped. Your children lived to have children of their own. You saved them." The other 6 moved closer to the fire. As the tobacco smoke surrounded them, their wolf forms began to flicker. I caught glimpses of the men they'd been young and old, tall and short, but all with the bearing of warriors. "But the anger," one of them said. "The need to hunt and kill, it's so strong." "Because you were good warriors," Crow Wing said, adding more tobacco to the fire. "Your protective instincts were strong in life. They kept you trapped after death." He began another song, this one about letting go, about spirits finding their way to the next world. The wolf spirits began to change more quickly now, shifting between animal and human forms. "We don't want to leave," Stands Like Mountain said. "This is our home, our sacred place." "You're not leaving," I realized. "You're going where you belong, to the spirit world, where you can watch over this place without being trapped by it." The fire was burning lower now, but the tobacco smoke was thicker than ever. In its silver swirls, I began to see other figures, older spirits, Cherokee ancestors welcoming the 7 warriors home. One by one, the wolf spirits began to fade. But before they disappeared completely, each one looked at me with human eyes. "Thank you," they said, "for remembering, for honoring our sacrifice." Stands Like Mountain was the last to go. He stood at the edge of the firelight, no longer a wolf but a proud Cherokee warrior in traditional dress. "This place will always be sacred," he said, "but it will no longer be cursed. Tell your people. Tell them our story. Let them remember that some died to protect what they loved." Then he was gone, faded into the tobacco smoke and moonlight. The bog fell silent, not the oppressive silence I'd experienced before, but peaceful quiet. Natural sounds returned, water lapping against the shore, night birds calling, small animals moving through the brush. "It's over," Crow Wing said, packing up his sacred objects. "They're at peace now." I scattered the remaining tobacco on the water and watched the smoke drift away in the night breeze. Somewhere in that smoke, 7 Cherokee warriors had found their way home at last. 3 months later, the federal government designated Cranberry Glades as a Cherokee memorial site. Joseph Crow Wing worked with the Park Service to put up a marker telling the story of Stands Like Mountain and his 6 brothers. Their sacrifice is remembered now, honored by all who visit this sacred place. I still work these mountains, still get calls about strange things in the wilderness, but I understand now that some mysteries can't be solved with tracking skills and military training. Sometimes you need the old wisdom, the traditional ways, the knowledge that my grandmother tried to teach me. The bog is peaceful now. Hunters can pass through safely as long as they show respect for the land and the spirits who died protecting it. But sometimes, on nights when the moon is full and the mist rises from the acidic water, visitors report seeing 7 figures standing guard at the edge of the bog. Not threatening now, just watching, making sure their sacred ground stays safe. And I sleep better knowing they're there. My name is Margaret Redstone, but everyone calls me Maggie. I've been a park ranger for 10 years now, and I'm the first woman to work this section of the Blue Ridge Parkway. Most days, I love my job. I get to protect the mountains I grew up in, study the animals I've loved since I was a kid, and prove that a coal miner's daughter can earn a PhD and make something of herself. But today isn't most days. I'm standing at the edge of what used to be a hunting camp, and my hands won't stop shaking. 6 men came up here 3 days ago. Big, strong men who knew these mountains. Now they're all dead. The bodies are arranged in a perfect circle around their cold fire pit. No blood, no signs of fighting. Their rifles are still loaded, leaning against trees exactly where they left them. It's like they just sat down and died. Jesus, Maggie. Sheriff Tom Wilson spits tobacco juice into the dirt. What do you think happened? I walk around the circle, careful not to disturb anything. The men's faces are peaceful, almost sleepy, but their eyes are wide open, staring up at the sky like they saw something impossible. I don't know, I say, which is the truth. In 10 years of ranger work, I've seen bear attacks, hunting accidents, even a few murders. This isn't any of those things. That's when I see the tracks. They start about 20 feet from the camp, coming out of the thick woods. At first, I think they're bear tracks. There's live, we have plenty of black bears up here. But as I get closer, my scientific training kicks in, and nothing makes sense. The tracks are huge, 22 inches long, 8 inches wide. They look almost human, but no human has feet that big. The stride length is impossible too, nearly 8 feet between steps. Whatever made these tracks was walking upright and was at least 8 feet tall. Sheriff, you need to see this. Wilson trudges over, his belly jiggling with each step. He's been sheriff for 20 years, but he's never liked coming up to Devil's Backbone. Most locals avoid this ridge, and now I'm starting to understand why. Hell, he mutters, staring at the tracks. That's got to be the biggest bear I ever seen. Bears don't walk on 2 legs, I tell him. And look at this. I point to a massive oak tree near the tracks. Deep claw marks score the bark, starting about 12 feet off the ground and dragging down. The gouges are fresh, still weeping sap. Bears can't reach that high, I say. And these marks, they're different. Look at the spacing. The claw marks are too wide, too deep. Each groove is as thick as my finger. Whatever made them had claws like knives and the strength to tear through oak bark like it was paper. Wilson takes off his hat and scratches his bald head. Maggie, I think we should head back down. Let the state boys handle this. We can't just leave. I pull out my camera and start taking pictures. People need to know what happened here. Other hunters come up this way all the time. That's what I'm afraid of. As I photograph the tracks, something else catches my eye. The forest is too quiet. In September, these mountains should be full of life. Squirrels gathering nuts, birds preparing for winter, insects buzzing in the warm afternoon air. But there's nothing. Even the wind has died down. It's like the whole mountain is holding its breath. I follow the tracks away from the camp. They lead deeper into the woods, toward the highest part of Devil's Backbone Ridge. The prints are so deep they've pressed into solid rock in some places. Whatever made them weighs more than any animal I know. Maggie, Wilson calls from behind me, don't go off alone. But I'm already too far to turn back now. The tracks lead to a clearing where the trees thin out, and I can see the valley spread below us. It's beautiful up here, wild and untouched. This is why I became a ranger, to protect places like this. Then I see the hare. Stuck on a broken branch, about 9 feet off the ground, is a clump of coarse, dark hair. I carefully pull it free and hold it up to the light. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Thicker than bear hair, almost like wire. And it's huge. Each strand is nearly as thick as fishing line. I bag the sample and head back toward camp, my mind racing. In all my years studying wildlife, I've never encountered anything like this. The rational part of my brain, the part with the PhD, is trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it's a sick bear, walking upright because of an injury. Maybe the hair is from some escaped animal, a circus bear or something like that. But deep down, I know I'm lying to myself. When I get back to the camp, Wilson is pacing nervously by his patrol car. We need to go, Maggie. Now, just give me 5 more minutes to document the scene. No, his voice is sharp. My grandfather used to tell stories about this ridge. Said things live up here that ain't natural. I thought he was just trying to scare me, but now. What kind of stories? Wilson looks around like he's afraid something might be listening. Stories about the Devil's Backbone, about what guards it. Maggie, people have been dying up here for over 100 years. Always the same way. Hunters found dead in circles. No signs of violence. My grandfather said the Cherokee used to avoid this place. Called it cursed. I want to argue with him, to use my education to explain away his superstitions. But standing here in this too quiet forest, surrounded by impossible evidence, I can't find the words. As we drive back down the mountain, I keep looking in the rearview mirror. The sun is starting to set, and the shadows are getting long. For just a moment, I think I see something moving in the trees, something big and dark that doesn't belong. But when I blink, it's gone. 3 days later, I'm back on Devil's Backbone, but this time I'm not alone. Park Superintendent James Morrison drove up from headquarters in Richmond, bringing Dr. Patricia Fleming, a wildlife expert from the university. Morrison's a no-nonsense guy, ex-military from the Pacific Theater. He doesn't believe in anything he can't shoot. Rangers, let's keep this simple, Morrison says as we unload equipment from his truck. We've got 6 dead hunters and a media circus forming down in town. The governor's office is asking questions. I need answers, not folklore. Dr. Fleming adjusts her thick glasses and pulls out a notebook. She's young, maybe younger than me, with short blonde hair and the eager look of someone who thinks she's about to make her career. I've reviewed the photographs you sent, Ranger Redstone. Very interesting. I specialize in cryptozoology. It's COD, the study of unknown animals. Cases like this are exactly why I got into this field. I lead them to the campsite, which the sheriff's department has left undisturbed. The bodies are gone, but everything else remains exactly as we found it. Morrison takes one look at the tracks and whistles low. That's a big son of a bitch, whatever it is. The stride length suggests a creature between 8 and 10 feet tall, Doctor. Fleming says, measuring the distance between prints. The foot structure is humanoid but enlarged. It's fascinating. Fascinating doesn't help me explain this to the press. Morrison grumbles. I show them the claw marks on the tree, the hair sample I collected, and the strange way the forest feels. Too quiet, too empty. Doctor. Fleming documents everything with scientific precision, but I can see excitement building in her eyes. This could be it. She whispers to me when Morrison's not listening. The first real evidence of a North American cryptid. Think about what this could mean for science. But I'm not thinking about science anymore. I'm thinking about the 6 dead men and the families who'll never see them again. We set up camp about a quarter mile from the original site. Morrison insists on bringing military-grade equipment. Motion sensors, night vision cameras, even a rifle that looks like it could stop a tank. Dr. Fleming has her scientific instruments, devices that measure temperature, electromagnetic fields, and sound frequencies. If there's an unknown animal up here, she says, we'll document everything about it. As the sun goes down, Morrison checks his weapons for the 3rd time. I don't like this place, he admits. Something feels wrong. The air's too thick, like before a storm. He's right. The pressure feels heavy, oppressive, and the silence is getting worse. Earlier, we could at least hear wind in the trees. Now there's nothing. Dr. Fleming's instruments start acting strange around 10 o'clock. Her electromagnetic field detector spikes wildly, then goes dead. The thermometer shows the temperature dropping 20 degrees in 5 minutes, which is impossible. Equipment malfunction, Morrison says, but he doesn't sound convinced. That's when we hear it. The howling starts low, like wind through a canyon. But wind doesn't harmonize with itself, and wind doesn't make your bones vibrate. The sound seems to come from everywhere at once, surrounding our camp. Jesus Christ! Morrison breathes, reaching for his rifle. The howling changes pitch, becoming something almost musical but wrong, like a song played backwards. Doctor. Fleming's recording equipment captures it, but when she plays it back, the speakers emit only static. It's jamming our electronics somehow, she says, but her voice is shaking. Then the footsteps start. Thump, thump, thump. Each step shakes the ground like a small earthquake. Whatever's out there is massive, and it's circling our camp. The motion sensors should be going crazy, but they're dead silent. The night vision cameras show nothing but empty forest. Contact front, Morrison shouts, swinging his rifle toward the sound. But there's nothing to shoot at. The footsteps continue, getting closer. Thump, thump, thump. Something huge is walking just beyond the edge of our firelight, but we can't see it. Doctor. Fleming grabs my arm. Maggie, look at the trees. The branches are moving, bending inward toward our camp like something enormous is pushing through them. But we still can't see anything. It's like we're being stalked by an invisible giant. Morrison fires a warning shot into the air. The gunshot echoes through the mountains, but the footsteps don't stop. If anything, they get louder. Fall back to the vehicles, Morrison orders. We grab what equipment we can and run for the trucks. Behind us, the footsteps pick up speed. T-H-U-M-P, 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 T-H-U-M-P. Whatever's chasing us is moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. I fumble with my truck keys, my hands shaking so bad I can barely get them in the ignition. Morrison's already in his vehicle, engine running. Doctor. Fleming jumps into my passenger seat just as something massive crashes through the trees behind us. Go, 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 Morrison shouts over the radio. I floor the gas pedal, and we tear down the mountain road. In my rearview mirror, I see trees swaying like something huge just passed through them. But I still can't see what's doing it. We don't stop until we reach the ranger station at the bottom of the mountain. Morrison's face is pale, and his hands are still shaking as he lights a cigarette. 40 years in the Army, he says, and I've never seen anything like that. Doctor, Fleming is staring at her instruments, most of which are now completely dead. The electromagnetic interference was off the charts, she says. Whatever that thing is, it generates some kind of field that disrupts electronics. Or it's smart enough to know how to avoid our equipment, I add. Both of them look at me like I've said something crazy. But I've been thinking about those dead hunters, about the way they were arranged in a perfect circle. That wasn't random, that was deliberate. We're dealing with something intelligent, I continue. Something that understands human behavior well enough to hunt us. Morrison stubs out his cigarette. Intelligence or not, we can't let this thing kill more people. Hunting season starts next week. If we don't handle this, more folks are going to die. Dr. Fleming nods eagerly. We need to go back. With better equipment, more preparation. This could be the discovery of the century. But I'm thinking about those peaceful faces, those wide-open eyes staring at the sky. Whatever killed those men didn't just hunt them. It wanted them to see it coming. A week later, we're back on Devil's Backbone with enough equipment to start a small war. Morrison brought 2 more rangers, both ex-military like himself. Dr. Fleming returned with a whole team from the university, plus equipment that looks like it belongs in a science fiction movie. But I'm starting to realize that all our technology and weapons might not be enough. The first sign that something's wrong comes when we try to drive up the mountain. My truck starts sputtering halfway up, even though I just had it serviced. Morrison's vehicle dies completely near the old campsite. The university van makes it a little further before its engine seizes up. Electromagnetic interference, Doctor. Fleming explains, but she looks worried. It's much stronger than before. We have to hike the last mile to our campsite, carrying equipment that gets heavier with each step. The forest is still unnaturally quiet, but now there's something else, a feeling of being watched. Every few minutes, I catch movement in my peripheral vision, but when I turn to look, nothing's there. Spread out, stay in radio contact, Morrison orders as we set up camp. This thing wants to play games, we'll play games. But our radios only work intermittently. Sometimes they crackle with static that sounds almost like voices. Other times, they pick up what sounds like breathing. Slow, deep breaths that no human could make. The first attack comes just after sunset. Ranger Collins is checking the perimeter when we hear him scream. It's not a human sound. It's the sound of pure terror, raw and animal. Morrison and I run toward his last known position, but we find only his rifle lying in the dirt. Collins is gone. His footprints end abruptly in the middle of a clearing, like he just vanished into thin air. But there are other prints now, those massive, impossible tracks we've been following. And they're fresh. "Collins, respond!" Morrison shouts into his radio. The only answer is static, and then, faintly, we hear Collins screaming somewhere in the distance. The sound echoes off the mountains, making it impossible to tell which direction it's coming from. "He's alive," I say. "We have to find him." But Morrison grabs my arm. "No. We stick together." That thing took Collins to split us up. Doctor. Fleming is studying the tracks with her instruments. "These prints are deeper than before," she says. "Whatever made them is carrying extra weight now. We all know what that extra weight is." Back at camp, we huddle around our fire while Morrison tries to reach headquarters on the emergency radio. But all he gets is that same static, those same impossible voices speaking words we can't understand. Around midnight, we see the eyes. They're red, glowing like coals in the darkness beyond our firelight. At first, I think it's just 2 eyes, but then I realize they're too far apart, too high off the ground. Whatever's watching us has to be at least 10 feet tall. "There," I whisper, pointing. Morrison swings his rifle toward the eyes, but they're already gone. A few seconds later, they appear in a different spot, then another. The thing is moving around our camp in a wide circle, always staying just beyond the range of our lights. "It's playing with us," Dr. Fleming says. Her voice is barely steady. One of the other rangers, a young guy named Martinez, cracks under the pressure. "We need to get out of here," he shouts, standing up. "Collins is dead, and we're next." "Sit down, son," Morrison orders, but Martinez is already grabbing his pack. I'm not dying for some monster. Martinez runs into the darkness before anyone can stop him. We hear his footsteps crashing through the underbrush, getting fainter and fainter. Then silence. 5 minutes later, Martinez starts screaming too. This time, the screams are closer. Much closer. They're coming from directly above us. We all look up into the tree canopy, but our flashlights can't penetrate the thick branches. Martinez is up there somewhere, and he's terrified. Help me. His voice echoes down through the leaves. It's got me. It's got me. Morrison aims his rifle into the trees and fires. The muzzle flash lights up the forest for a split second, and I see something that makes my blood freeze. There's a shape in the trees, massive, dark, and impossibly agile. It's moving through the branches like they're highways, carrying something that might be Martinez. But the shape is wrong. Too big, too fast for anything natural. Martinez's screams cut off abruptly. We're leaving, Morrison says. Now. But when we try to leave, we discover that all our vehicles are dead. Not just the engines, everything. The headlights won't work, the radios are silent, even our flashlights are starting to dim. We're trapped on Devil's Backbone with something that hunts in the dark. Dr. Fleming is hyperventilating. This is impossible, she keeps saying. Animals don't behave this way, they don't use tactics. But I'm starting to understand that we're not dealing with an animal. Animals kill for food or territory. This thing is doing something else entirely. Around 3 a.m, we find Collins. He's hanging from a tree about 50 yards from our camp, suspended by thick vines that couldn't possibly hold a man's weight. He's alive but unconscious, and when we cut him down, he's babbling about stone skin and red eyes and something that spoke to him in a voice like grinding rocks. It let me go, he keeps saying. It let me go so I could warn you. Warn us about what? Morrison demands. Collins looks at each of us with wide, terrified eyes. It's not just hunting us, he whispers. It's hurting us, driving us somewhere specific. That's when I realize the truth. All our equipment failures, all our vehicles breaking down, the way it took Martinez and then returned Collins, it's all designed to keep us here, to force us to go where it wants us to go. Where? I ask Collins. Where does it want us? He points up the ridge, toward the highest peak of Devil's Backbone. There's something up there, he says. Something old. It showed me. Pictures in my head. Stone circles. Bones. Lots of bones. Doctor. Fleming has stopped hyperventilating and started taking notes again, but her hands are shaking so badly she can barely write. A feeding ground, she says. It's driving us to its feeding ground. Morrison checks his rifle, though we all know bullets didn't help last time. Then we don't give it what it wants. We go down the mountain, on foot if we have to. But when we try to leave, we discover that the thing has been busy during the night. Trees have fallen across every trail leading down the mountain. Massive boulders block the roads. We're not just trapped on Devil's Backbone, we're being forced to climb to its very peak. We start climbing at dawn because we don't have any other choice. The thing, only whatever it is, has made sure we can only go one direction, up. The trail to the peak is ancient, probably made by Cherokee hunters centuries ago. But as we climb, I start noticing things that don't belong on any normal hiking trail. Stone markers that look almost like warnings, piles of rocks arranged in patterns that hurt to look at directly, and bones, lots of bones. These are old, Doctor, Fleming says, examining a skull that's definitely human. Some of them are very old. Pre-colonial, maybe. Collins hasn't spoken since we started climbing. He just follows behind us, his eyes constantly scanning the trees. Whatever he saw last night broke something in him. About halfway to the peak, Morrison stops suddenly. Do you hear that? We all listen. At first, there's only the usual mountain silence. Then I hear it too, a low humming sound, like electricity running through power lines. But there are no power lines up here. It's coming from up ahead, I say. The humming gets louder as we climb. Soon it's joined by other sounds, whispers in a language I don't recognize, and underneath it all, a deep thrumming like a massive heartbeat. We should go back, Doctor, Fleming says, but we all know we can't. The only way off this mountain is through whatever's waiting at the top. The peak of Devil's Backbone is a flat plateau surrounded by standing stones. Not natural rock formations, never. These are carved, arranged in a perfect circle around a central area that looks like an altar. The humming is louder here, and I can feel it in my bones. Cherokee sacred site, I realize. This is a Cherokee sacred site, but it's been changed, corrupted somehow. The stones are covered in scratches that might be writing, but the symbols make my eyes water when I try to read them. The ground inside the circle is stained dark with something that isn't dirt. That's when we see it. The creature emerges from behind one of the standing stones, and it's nothing like what I expected. It's huge, 12 feet tall at least, but it doesn't look like any animal I've ever studied. Its hide looks like stone, gray and rough, but it moves with fluid grace. Its arms are too long, its fingers end in claws that could tear through steel. And its eyes burn red like coals, and they're looking right at me. "Weapons free," Morrison shouts, and he opens fire. The bullets hit the creature dead center, but they bounce off its stone skin like pebbles. It doesn't even seem to notice that we're shooting at it. Instead, it tilts its massive head and makes a sound like grinding granite. It's talking. The words hurt to hear, like they're being carved directly into my brain. But somehow, I understand them. Asterisk trespassers. Defilers. You bring death to the sacred places. Asterisk doctor. Fleming drops her equipment and falls to her knees. "It's sentient," she gasps. "It's actually talking to us." The creature takes a step forward, and the ground shakes. Asterisk. For 13 cycles of the moon dark, I have slept. For 13 cycles, the sacred places have been quiet. But you wake me with your violence, your disrespect. Asterisk Morrison empties his clip into the thing's chest, but the bullets don't even scratch it. "What do you want?" he shouts. The creature's red eyes focus on him, with something that might be amusement. Asterisk. I am the guardian. I am the keeper of the sacred bones. This ridge is mine to protect, and you are mine to judge. Asterisk Collins finally speaks, his voice barely a whisper. The Cherokee. They made a deal with it. The creature's massive head turns toward him. Asterisk. The first people understood. They gave respect, offered tribute, honored the ancient ways. But you come with guns and machines, seeking to conquer what should be revered. Asterisk. We're not conquering anything, I say, surprising myself by speaking up. We're here to protect this place too. The creature studies me with those burning eyes. Asterisk. Protect? You serve those who would turn sacred ground into highways and strip mines. You serve those who would cage the wild places and sell them to the highest bidder. Asterisk. It's not wrong. I think about all the development proposals I've had to fight, all the politicians who see the mountains as resources to be exploited rather than treasures to be preserved. Asterisk. But perhaps. Asterisk. The creature moves closer, and I can feel heat radiating from its stone skin. Asterisk. Perhaps there is still wisdom among your kind. You carry the scent of the mountains in your blood, child of the coal-black earth. Your ancestors understood the old ways. Asterisk. My great-grandmother's journal, hidden in my family's attic, contains stories about creatures like this. Stories I always thought were just folklore. What do you want from us? I ask. Asterisk. Respect. Recognition. The sacred places must remain sacred. The bones of my people must not be disturbed, and those who come seeking to harm must face judgment. Asterisk. The hunters. Dr. Fleming says, you killed them because they were hunting on sacred ground. Asterisk. I gave them visions of truth before the end. They saw what they had become. Killers of innocence, destroyers of balance. They chose their fate. Asterisk Morrison is reloading his rifle, but I put a hand on his arm. Don't. I tell him. It's not trying to hurt us. Asterisk. The young guardian speaks wisdom. Asterisk. The creature says. Asterisk. But choice is before you all. Leave this place and speak of it to no one, or stay and serve as my voice among your people. Asterisk. And if we refuse? Morrison asks. The creature's eyes flare brighter. Asterisk. Then you join the circle of bones, and I find others who will listen. Asterisk. Collins starts crying. I can't leave. It showed me things. It made me understand. We've been doing everything wrong. Doctor. Fleming is furiously taking notes, but her scientific excitement has been replaced by something like religious awe. "This changes everything," she whispers. "Absolutely everything." Morrison looks at each of us, then back at the creature. "What kind of service are you talking about?" Asterisk, guardianship, protection. Ensure that the sacred places remain untouched. Turn away those who would bring harm. Serve as the bridge between the old ways and the new. Asterisk, I think about my job, about all the development fights I've been losing lately, about how much easier it would be to protect these mountains if people knew there was something here worth being afraid of. "I'll do it," I say. "I'll be your voice." The creature nods slowly, asterisk. Then the compact is renewed. "But know this, young guardian, the responsibility is not light. The sacred places stretch throughout these mountains, and all must be protected." Asterisk, Morrison lowers his rifle. "What about us? What about what we've seen here?" Asterisk, you may leave with your lives and your memories, but if you speak of this place to those who would bring harm, if you guide others here who do not come in respect, the compact will be broken. Asterisk, Dr. Fleming closes her notebook. "I'll write about environmental protection," she says, "about the need to preserve wilderness areas. But I won't mention this." Collins just nods, tears still streaming down his face. The creature turns to go, then pauses. Asterisk, the moon dark comes again in 13 years, child of the coal-black earth. When it does, I will wake, and the sacred places will need defending once more. Will you be ready? Asterisk, I'll be ready, I promise. As the creature disappears into the forest, the humming stops, and the normal sounds of the mountains return. Birds start singing, wind rustles through the trees. The terrible pressure that's been building in my head finally lifts. But I know nothing will ever be the same. That was 25 years ago. I'm 53 now, and I've been the regional supervisor for this section of the Blue Ridge Mountains for the last decade. People think I'm just really good at my job, the way I always seem to know which development projects to fight hardest, which areas need the most protection, which hunting parties might cause trouble. They don't know about my monthly hikes to Deceiver, certain remote locations. They don't know about the offerings I leave, not sacrifices, just tokens of respect. Tobacco, like my Cherokee neighbors taught me, water from clean streams, sometimes just a quiet moment of acknowledgement that these places are sacred. Morrison retired 5 years ago and moved to Florida. Before he left, he shook my hand and said, "I still dream about that thing sometimes. But you know what? I sleep better knowing you're up here watching over things." Dr. Fleming became one of the country's leading advocates for wilderness preservation. She never published anything about cryptids, but her papers on the spiritual value of untouched ecosystems have influenced environmental policy across the nation. We exchange Christmas cards, and she always asks how the mountains are doing. Collins never left the area. He works for the Park Service now, leading educational tours about Cherokee history and culture. Visitors love his stories about the spiritual significance of these mountains. They think he's just a really passionate historian. He and I sometimes run into each other on the trails. We don't talk much about that night, but there's an understanding between us. He sees things sometimes, movement in the trees, eyes in the darkness, and he nods at me like he's reporting in. The compact has held. Devil's Backbone remains closed to hunting, officially due to geological instability. Other sensitive sites throughout the mountains have been quietly protected through careful regulation and strategic environmental impact studies. A few developers have tried to challenge the restrictions, but their surveyors keep reporting equipment failures and strange accidents in certain areas. Hunting parties still come to the mountains, but they stick to approved areas now. The few times someone has wandered too far off the designated trails, they've returned with stories about getting lost, about sudden equipment failures, about the feeling of being watched. Word gets around among hunters. They police themselves now. It's not perfect. 13 years ago, a group of developers tried to run a road through one of the sacred sites. They found their bulldozers wrapped around trees the next morning, twisted like children's toys. The insurance company ruled it an act of God. The developers decided to build somewhere else. The media occasionally picks up stories about the Devil's Backbone mystery, the unsolved deaths of those 6 hunters from 1971. They interview me sometimes, and I tell them we investigated thoroughly but never found conclusive evidence. Cold case, probably an environmental accident, End of story. But I know the truth. I know that something ancient and powerful watches over these mountains. Something that remembers when the first people walked here, when the Cherokee made their agreements with the spirits of the land. Something that bridges the gap between the old world and the new. And I know that in 8 more years, when the moon goes dark again in September, I'll hike up to Devil's Backbone one more time. I'll check on the stone circle, make sure the sacred places are still protected, and renew the compact that keeps the balance between humanity and the wild. My great-niece Sarah just graduated with a degree in environmental science. She's been asking about ranger positions in this area. I think she might be the right person to carry on the work when I'm too old to hike the high country. Some knowledge is meant to be passed down through generations. Some responsibilities are too important to let die. The mountains keep their secrets, and their secrets keep the mountains safe. And sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind is just right, I can hear something moving through the forest, something massive and ancient and protective. The sound doesn't frighten me anymore. It sounds like home. My name is Robert Thunderstone, but everyone calls me Bob. I've been a park ranger at Blackwater Falls State Park in West Virginia for 14 years now. Before that, I was in the war in Europe, building bridges and fixing rivers that got blown up. I'm 36 years old, and I thought I'd seen everything terrible this world could show a man. I was wrong. It was April 1959, and the spring thaw was making the water dangerous. The falls were running high and fast, dropping 62 feet into the dark pools below. I'd pulled more drowning victims out of those pools than I cared to count, but I'd never lost one. Not in 14 years. That was something I was proud of. The morning it all started, I was checking the water levels near the falls when I saw the car. A blue Ford station wagon, parked at the picnic area, with all 4 doors hanging open like broken wings. The engine was still warm. On the wooden table nearby, someone had laid out a perfect family picnic. Sandwiches cut in neat triangles, thermos of coffee still steaming, a child's red ball sitting right in the middle, but no people anywhere. I called out, "Hello, anyone there?" My voice echoed off the rocks, but no one answered back. That's when I noticed something strange about the water. Near the shore, it had turned a funny amber color, like old honey, and it was flowing the wrong way, upstream, against the current. I'd been working these waters for 14 years. Water doesn't flow uphill, not ever. I walked to the edge and knelt down, dipping my fingers in. The water was ice cold, colder than April water should be. And when I pulled my hand out, there was no wetness on my fingers. They were completely dry. That's when I heard the laughing. Children's voices, happy and bright, coming from somewhere down in the deep pools below the falls. But when I looked, there was nobody there. Just dark water and white mist rising up like ghost fingers. I ran back to my truck and radioed the station. "This is Thunderstone. I've got a missing family at Blackwater Falls. 5 people, looks like. Car's still here, food's still warm, but they're gone." "Any signs of foul play, Bob?" came the scratchy voice of dispatcher Mary. I looked back at the amber water, still flowing the wrong way. "I'm not sure yet, Mary. Send backup. And maybe call the state police." "Copy that, Bob. Be careful out there." I wish I'd listened to her. While I waited for help, I walked around the area, looking for tracks. The ground was soft from recent rain, and I could see footprints leading toward the falls, 2 adults and 3 children. Just like you'd expect from a family. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. The tracks just stopped. Right at the water's edge, they disappeared completely. Not like the people had waded in or been washed away. The prints just ended. Like they'd vanished into thin air. I set up my water testing equipment, the same gear I'd used for years to check temperatures and currents. But today, nothing worked right. The thermometer showed readings that couldn't be real. The water was both freezing and boiling at the same time. The current meter spun wildly in all directions. And my hydrophone, the underwater microphone I used to listen for trapped victims, picked up something that made my blood run cold. Singing. Underwater singing in a language I didn't recognize. But the strangest thing was the silence. Blackwater Falls drops 62 feet and hits those rocks with the force of a freight train. It should be loud enough to wake the dead. But standing there that morning, I couldn't hear the water at all. The falls were completely, impossibly silent. Captain Frank Morgan arrived with the state police dive team around noon. Frank was a good man, 10 years younger than me, but twice as brave when it came to underwater work. He took one look at the scene and shook his head. 14 years, Bob, he said. 14 years, and you've never lost one. What do you think happened here? I pointed to the amber water. See that color? It wasn't there yesterday, and watch how it moves. Frank squatted down and stared. The amber water was still flowing upstream, making these perfect geometric patterns like someone was stirring it with an invisible spoon. He reached for it, but I grabbed his wrist. Don't, I said. Trust me on this one. That afternoon, we brought in Dr. Linda Rivers, the park hydrologist. Linda was smart as a whip and had studied these waters for 8 years. If anyone could explain what was happening, it would be her. But even Linda looked confused when she saw the test results. This is impossible, Bob. The water temperature readings are off the charts. The mineral content is like nothing I've ever seen. And look at this. She showed me a photograph she'd taken underwater with a special camera. In the murky depths below the falls, you could see shapes moving, human-like figures swimming in water too deep and cold for anyone to survive. Could be debris, Frank suggested, but his voice didn't sound convinced. Debris doesn't swim, Linda said quietly. That night, I stayed late to guard the scene. The other families were supposed to arrive for weekend camping, and I couldn't let anyone else get near that water until we figured out what happened. I set up my tent near the parking area and tried to get some sleep, but around midnight I heard the voices again. Children laughing and playing, coming from the pools below the falls. This time, there were adult voices too, calling out in Cherokee. I recognized a few words from my childhood. My grandmother had been part Cherokee, and she'd taught me some basic phrases before she died. They were singing about water, about going home to the water. I grabbed my flashlight and crept toward the edge. The amber water was glowing now, giving off a soft light like fireflies. And in that glow, I could see them clearly for the first time. People. Dozens of them, floating just beneath the surface of the water. Men, women, and children, all dressed in old-fashioned clothes. Some looked like Cherokee, others like the white settlers who'd come through these mountains 100 years ago. They were beautiful and peaceful, moving through the water like they were dancing, and they were all looking at me. One of them, a Cherokee woman with long black hair, rose up until her head broke the surface. She smiled at me, and when she spoke, her voice sounded like water flowing over stones. "Come home, Robert Thunderstone," she said. "Come home to the water." I stumbled backward, my heart pounding like a drum. But I couldn't look away from her face. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen, and every part of my soul wanted to step into that amber water and join her. Instead, I ran. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see that Cherokee woman's face and hear her voice calling my name. By morning, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck, but I had work to do. Dr. Michael Stone arrived with his geological survey team at dawn. Stone was a professor from the university who'd been studying the cave systems behind Blackwater Falls for 20 years. If anyone could explain the weird water behavior, it would be him. But even Stone looked puzzled when he saw the readings. "This doesn't make sense, Bob. According to these measurements, there's a massive underground chamber system behind the falls. But I've mapped every inch of this area. Those chambers shouldn't exist." "Maybe they didn't exist before," I said, thinking about the singing voices and the impossible amber water. Stone's team lowered underwater cameras into the pools. What they found made everyone go quiet. The footage showed vast underwater caverns stretching back into the mountain, lit by that same amber glow. And moving through those caverns were dozens of human figures, swimming with impossible grace. "The camera must be malfunctioning," one of Stone's assistants said, but Linda shook her head. "I've checked all our equipment 3 times. Everything's working perfectly. This is really what's down there." That's when Samuel Flowing Brook arrived. Samuel was a Cherokee elder who lived about 20 miles away. He was 80 years old, with white hair down to his shoulders and eyes that seemed to see everything. I'd met him a few times over the years when he came to perform ceremonies at the old sacred sites in the park. He took one look at the amber water and stepped back, shaking his head. "You should not be here," he said in his quiet voice. "This is the time of the calling. The water spirits are gathering souls for the spring ceremony." "Water spirits?" Frank laughed. "Come on, Samuel. We're trying to find a missing family here." But Samuel wasn't laughing. "Your missing family is safe, safer than they have ever been, but they cannot come back. Not once the water has accepted them." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean, accepted them?" Samuel sat down on a fallen log and began rolling tobacco into a small pouch. "Long ago, my people performed sacred ceremonies at this waterfall. When the white settlers came, many of our ceremony keepers died protecting this place. Their spirits became part of the water, guardians of the sacred site." He pointed to the amber glow beneath the falls. "Every spring, during the time of renewal, they call out to lost souls. People who are broken, people who need healing, people who seek spiritual peace. The water spirits offer them eternal rest in the underwater realm." "That's just folklore," Dr. Stone said. "There has to be a scientific explanation." Samuel smiled sadly. "Your science cannot measure the weight of a soul, Dr. Stone. Your instruments cannot detect the sound of spiritual calling." But I was thinking about what he'd said. People who are broken. People who need healing. The missing family, maybe they hadn't been taken. Maybe they'd been called. That afternoon, more families started arriving for weekend camping. I tried to turn them away, but they'd driven hundreds of miles and had reservations. Frank and I set up barriers around the water, but I knew that wouldn't stop anyone who really wanted to get close. Around sunset, I was checking the barriers when I heard my name again. Robert Thunderstone. The Cherokee woman was back, floating just beneath the surface of the amber water. This time, she wasn't alone. I could see the missing family with her, a man, woman, and 3 children, all floating peacefully in the glowing water. They looked happy. More than happy, they looked complete. "Your war wounds run deep," the woman said, her voice like a gentle current. "The bridge, explosions. The friends you could not save. The faith you lost in the mud of foreign battlefields. We can heal all of that, Robert Thunderstone. We can give you peace." She was right, and that scared me more than anything. I had lost my faith during the war. I'd seen too much death, too much suffering. My father had been a preacher, and I'd grown up believing in God's love and protection. But in Europe, watching good men die for no reason, I'd stopped believing in anything except the cold facts of engineering and physics. "The water remembers all pain," the woman continued. "It can wash away everything that hurts you. All you have to do is step forward." I wanted to. God, help me. I wanted to step into that amber water more than I'd ever wanted anything. But something held me back. Maybe it was my ranger training, or maybe it was the stubborn streak I'd inherited from my Scottish grandfather. "The family," I said. "The missing people. Are they alive?" "They are more than alive. They are eternal. They are home. But they can't come back?" For the first time, the woman's smile faded. "The water does not give up its children, but it only takes those who choose to come. Your missing family chose this. They were tired of the pain of the upper world." That night, I called my supervisor and requested emergency help. "I need a Cherokee specialist," I told him. "Someone who understands the old traditions." "Bob, are you feeling all right? You've been under a lot of stress." "Just trust me on this one, sir. Something's happening here that's bigger than a normal missing persons case." The next morning, a new family tried to set up camp near the falls. Despite our barriers and warnings, the father, a man named Bill Peterson, Imandi, insisted on bringing his kids down to see the water. "We drove 8 hours to get here," he said. "My kids have been talking about this waterfall for months." I tried to explain that it wasn't safe, but Peterson wouldn't listen. Around noon, I saw him and his family walking toward the amber water, moving like they were in a trance. I ran after them, shouting warnings. But they didn't seem to hear me. The Peterson children, 2 little girls and a boy, were laughing and holding hands as they walked straight toward the water's edge. "Stop," I yelled, but it was too late. The amber water reached out like liquid fingers, wrapping around their ankles. For a moment, the whole family stood there, smiling peacefully. Then the water pulled them gently beneath the surface, and they were gone. No splash, no struggle. They just sank into the amber glow like they were coming home. I dove in after them, but the water was wrong. It felt thick, like swimming through honey, and I couldn't tell which way was up. Voices surrounded me, dozens of Cherokee voices singing in harmony. And I could see them all now, centuries of people who'd been called to the water. Cherokee ceremony keepers, Underground Railroad refugees, families like the Petersons who'd chosen peace over pain. They were, all trying to pull me deeper, their hands gentle but insistent. "Come home, Robert," they whispered. "Come home to the water." But I fought my way back to the surface, gasping and choking. When I crawled out onto the bank, Samuel Flowing Brook was waiting for me. "You saw them," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, still coughing up amber water. They wanted me to stay. The calling is strongest for those who carry the deepest wounds. Your war trauma, your lost faith, your setgens. These things make you very attractive to the water spirits. How do I stop this? More families are coming. I can't let this happen again. Samuel was quiet for a long time, watching the amber water swirl in its impossible patterns. Finally, he said, "There is a way, but it requires honoring the old agreements. It requires acknowledging why the spirits are here." "What do you mean?" "The Cherokee ceremony keepers who died protecting this place, they were never properly honored. Their sacrifice was forgotten. The sacred site was turned into a tourist attraction. Every spring, they call out to heal the pain they see in visitors, but what they really want is recognition, respect." I looked back at the glowing water, thinking about the Peterson family and the first missing group. "So what do we do?" Samuel stood up and shouldered his bag. "We perform the water ceremony, we honor the spirits properly, and we ask them to let the visitors choose freely without the spiritual calling. Will that work? Maybe. Or maybe they will decide to take everyone who comes near the water." He started walking toward his truck. "But we have to try. The ceremony must be performed at sunset, when the veil between worlds is thinnest." As he drove away, I heard the children laughing again from the pools below. But this time, the sound didn't seem peaceful. It sounded hungry. Word spread fast about the Peterson family disappearance. By noon, we had news crews from 3 counties, FBI agents asking questions, and park officials demanding answers I couldn't give. How do you explain to federal agents that Cherokee water spirits are collecting souls for an underwater realm? Frank pulled me aside while the investigators were setting up their equipment. "Bob, what really happened to those families? And don't give me any ghost stories. I need the truth." I looked at my old friend, this good man who'd risked his life alongside me on dozens of water rescues. Frank deserved honesty, even if it sounded crazy. "The truth is that there are spirits in that water, Frank. Cherokee ceremony keepers who died protecting this sacred site. They're offering eternal peace to people who are suffering, but once someone accepts that offer, they can't come back." Frank stared at me for a long moment. Then he said, "Bob, I've known you for 8 years. You're the most level-headed, practical man I've ever met. If you tell me there are spirits in that water, then I believe you. The question is, what do we do about it?" Before I could answer, Dr. Rivers came running over with her latest test results. "You guys need to see this," she said, spreading her charts on the hood of my truck. "The water temperature has dropped 20 degrees in the last hour. The current patterns are getting more complex. And listen to this." She turned on her hydrophone equipment. Through the speakers came the sound of Cherokee singing, dozens of voices in perfect harmony. But underneath the singing was something else, a low, rhythmic sound like a massive heartbeat. "That's impossible," Frank said. "You can't hear heartbeats underwater." "It's not a human heartbeat," Linda said quietly. "According to my analysis, it's too large, too slow. It's like the water itself has a pulse." That's when the FBI agent in charge, a stern woman named Agent Sarah Cross, came over to question me. "Ranger Thunderstone, I need you to walk me through exactly what you observed when the Peterson family disappeared." I told her the truth, that the family had walked into the water and vanished beneath the surface. I left out the part about the amber glow and the spiritual calling. "And you attempted a rescue?" "Yes, ma'am. I dove in immediately, but the water conditions were unusual." Agent Cross made notes in her file. "We're bringing in professional divers from the FBI recovery team. If there are bodies down there, we'll find them." "Agent Cross," I said carefully, "I really don't think that's a good idea. This water is dangerous in ways that normal safety protocols don't cover." She looked at me like I was simple. "Ranger Thunderstone, I appreciate your concern, but this is now a federal investigation. We'll handle the recovery operation." That afternoon, the FBI dive team arrived. 3 experienced divers with military-grade equipment, led by a tough ex-Navy SEAL named Martinez. They set up their gear while Agent Cross briefed them on the mission. I tried one more time to warn them. Martinez, I've been working these waters for 14 years. There's something wrong down there, something that your equipment won't protect you from. Martinez laughed. Ranger, I've dived in combat zones, underwater caves, and nuclear reactor pools. I think I can handle a waterfall in West Virginia. They went in at 3 p.m. The plan was a simple grid search of the pools below the falls, using underwater cameras and sonar to locate the missing bodies. But as soon as Martinez entered the amber water, his radio went dead. On the surface, we could see his bubbles, but we couldn't hear him. Then his partner, Diver 2, went silent as well. Finally, Diver 3, a young woman named Garcia, started screaming through her radio. "They're everywhere," she shouted. "People in the water. They're trying to pull me down. They're singing, and it's so beautiful, and I want to go with them." Agent Cross grabbed the radio. "Garcia, abort the dive. Return to surface immediately." But Garcia's voice had changed. It was dreamy, peaceful. "It's okay. They're showing me such wonderful things. The underwater city is so beautiful. I think I'll stay." We never saw any of the 3 divers again. Agent Cross was furious and scared. "What the hell is in that water?" Before I could answer, Samuel Flowing Brook's truck pulled up. The old Cherokee elder climbed out slowly, carrying a large leather bag and moving like a man heading to his own execution. "The ceremony must be performed now," he said. "Before sunset, the water spirits are angry about the intrusion, and they're gathering strength. Soon, they will not need permission to take souls." "What ceremony?" Agent Cross demanded. Samuel ignored her and spoke directly to me. "Robert Thunderstone, you must help me. The ceremony requires someone who has been called by the water but chose to resist. Someone who carries old wounds but refuses to surrender them." "I don't know anything about Cherokee ceremonies." "You don't need to. You just need to stand with me at the water's edge and speak from your heart. Tell the spirits why their sacrifice should be honored. Ask them to grant mercy to future visitors." Agent Cross stepped between us. "Nobody is going near that water until I understand what's happening here." But as she spoke, we heard screaming from the camping area. 3 more families had arrived for the weekend, and they were all walking toward the falls like sleepwalkers. Men, women, and children, their eyes glazed over, moving in perfect unison toward the amber water. "Stop them!" Agent Cross shouted, but it was too late. The families reached the water's edge and stepped in without hesitation. The amber glow rose up around them like welcoming arms, and they sank beneath the surface with expressions of pure joy on their faces. Samuel was already walking toward the water, pulling sacred items from his leather bag. "The calling has become a harvest," he said over his shoulder. "We're out of time." I followed him, ignoring Agent Cross's orders to stay back. At the water's edge, Samuel began laying out his ceremony items: tobacco, sage, small stones carved with Cherokee symbols, and a long eagle feather. "The water ceremony honors the sacrifice of those who died protecting sacred sites," he explained as he worked. "It acknowledges their guardianship and asks for their blessing on future visitors." The amber water was churning now, glowing brighter as more spirits rose from the depths. I could see dozens of them: Cherokee warriors, ceremony keepers, Underground Railroad refugees, and all the modern families who'd been called to join them. "Robert Thunderstone," Samuel said, lighting the sage, "place your hands in the water and speak to the spirits. Tell them what you see." I knelt down and put my hands in the amber glow. The water was warm now, welcoming, and I could feel the spirits pressing around me. Their voices filled my mind, not threatening but pleading. Asterisk. We died protecting this sacred place. We became guardians to heal the broken souls who seek us. But no one remembers our sacrifice. No one honors our purpose. Asterisk. "I see you," I said out loud, my voice carrying across the water. "I see Cherokee ceremony keepers who died defending their sacred site. I see people who chose to become guardians, protecting this place for generations. Your sacrifice was real. Your guardianship is honored." The water began to calm, its glow shifting from urgent amber to peaceful gold. Samuel was singing now in Cherokee, his voice strong despite his age. The eagle feather in his hand caught the sunlight as he made offerings of tobacco to the four directions. Asterisk. But we are tired. Asterisk. The spirits whispered to me. Asterisk. Tired of watching people suffer. Tired of offering the only healing we know. The peace of the underwater realm. We want to rest. Asterisk, then rest, I said. But let people choose freely. Don't call to them with spiritual power. Let them decide for themselves whether to seek your healing. The Cherokee woman I'd seen before rose from the water one last time. But now she looked different. Not like a beautiful temptress, but like what she really was. A ceremony keeper who had died young, protecting something sacred, and had spent over a century trying to heal others' pain. You understand the burden of guardianship, she said. You have spent 14 years pulling broken people from these waters, trying to save them from drowning. We have spent 100 years trying to save them from spiritual drowning. But taking them from their families isn't the answer. No, she agreed sadly. It is not. We will honor your request, Robert Thunderstone. But the sacred site must be properly recognized. The Cherokee Nation must have a voice in protecting this place. Samuel finished his song and stood up, scattering the last of his tobacco on the water. It is done. The spirits have accepted the ceremony. The amber glow began to fade, and the water slowly returned to its normal clear color. The impossible upstream current stopped. The geometric patterns dissolved, and for the first time in days, I could hear the waterfall again. That thunderous crash of water on stone that had always been the voice of Blackwater Falls. But as the light faded, I saw one last vision in the water. All the people who'd been taken, the missing families, the FBI divers, everyone who'd been called to the underwater realm, they were still there, still peaceful, still choosing to stay. But now they were truly choosing, without the spiritual compulsion, and some of them were choosing to come back. As the amber glow faded from the water, something incredible happened. People began rising to the surface. First came Garcia, the young FBI diver, coughing and gasping as she broke through. Then Martinez and his partner, still in their diving gear, looking confused but alive. Finally, impossibly, the Peterson family surfaced, holding hands and smiling like they'd just woken from the most beautiful dream. Agent Cross and the paramedics rushed to help them, but the rescued people seemed more dazed than injured. They kept looking back at the water with expressions of longing, like they'd left something precious behind. "Where were you?" Agent Cross demanded as the medics checked Garcia's vital signs. Garcia's voice was dreamy, distant. "Underwater, in the most beautiful city you can imagine. Made of light and music and peace. Such peace." She grabbed Agent Cross's arm. "They wanted us to stay, the Cherokee spirits who built that place. They wanted to heal our pain." "What pain? You're a federal agent. You're trained for dangerous situations." "The pain from my brother's death, the guilt from the people I couldn't save in my last mission. They knew about all of it, and they wanted to take it away." Garcia looked back at the water. Part of me wanted to let them. The Peterson family told a similar story. The father, Bill, had been struggling with depression since losing his job. His wife, Sarah, had been dealing with her mother's recent death. The children had been acting out, confused by their parents' sadness. "The spirits showed us a place where none of that mattered," Bill said, his arm around his wife. "Where we could just be together, peaceful and happy forever." It was tempting. "But we chose to come back," Sarah added, "when they gave us the real choice. Without the calling, I guess. We chose our world. Our real life." Samuel nodded approvingly. The ceremony worked. The spirits are no longer compelling people to join them. Now they only accept those who truly choose to stay. "You mean some people chose to stay down there?" Agent Cross asked. "The first missing family," I said quietly. "They're still in the underwater realm. They chose to remain." That evening, as the FBI packed up their equipment and the rescued families were taken to the hospital for observation, Samuel and I sat by the now normal waterfall. The sound of rushing water was music to my ears after days of impossible silence. "You did well, Robert Thunderstone," Samuel said. "The spirits recognized your authority because you understand their burden. You've spent years saving people from drowning. They spent a century trying to save people from spiritual drowning. But it's not over, is it?" Samuel shook his head. "The sacred site is still active. The Cherokee ceremony keepers are still there, still guardians. But now they follow the old rules. They only help those who seek them out willingly, and they allow people to choose freely whether to accept their healing. What about the underwater realm, the city Garcia described? It exists. It has always existed. It is a place of healing for souls too damaged to continue in this world. Some people will always choose that peace over the struggle of earthly life. Samuel stood up and shouldered his bag. Your job now is to make sure people understand what they're choosing. My job? The spirits have marked you, Robert. You've been called but chose to resist. You've participated in the water ceremony. You're connected to them now. That connection will help you protect future visitors. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. What do you mean, connected? You'll know when someone is being called. You'll be able to sense the spiritual attraction before it becomes compulsion, and you'll have the authority to guide people to make free choices. Over the next few weeks, everything Samuel predicted came true. I could sense when visitors were drawn to the water for spiritual reasons rather than just curiosity. There was a subtle difference, a dreamy look in their eyes, a tendency to walk toward the falls without really seeing their surroundings. Most of the time, I could talk to them, help them understand what they were feeling. Many visitors were dealing with grief, depression, trauma, or spiritual emptiness. The Cherokee spirits recognized that pain and offered healing. But now, thanks to the ceremony, people could choose traditional counseling, religious guidance, or other forms of help instead of surrendering to the underwater realm. Some still chose the water. An elderly man whose wife had died chose to join the spirits rather than face years of loneliness. A young woman with terminal cancer chose spiritual peace over months of painful treatment. A Vietnam veteran, haunted by memories of dead friends, chose the healing of the underwater realm over continued flashbacks and guilt. I learned not to judge those choices. The Cherokee spirits weren't evil. They were healers, offering the ultimate form of peace to souls too broken for earthly repair. My job was to make sure people understood what they were choosing and to protect those who weren't ready to make that choice. Agent Cross returned a month later with a team of anthropologists and a representative from the Cherokee Nation. After extensive negotiations, Blackwater Falls was officially designated as a Cherokee sacred site, with Samuel's tribe given co-management authority. This is the strangest report I've ever filed, Agent Cross told me on her last day. Officially, we're calling it an environmental hazard with unusual psychological effects. The public will never hear about water spirits or underwater realms. But you believe what happened here. She was quiet for a moment, watching the falls. My grandfather was Lakota. He used to tell stories about sacred places where the spirit world touches our world. I always thought they were just stories. She picked up a small stone and tossed it into the pool. Garcia says she can still hear them singing sometimes. The Cherokee voices. She says it's the most beautiful sound she's ever heard. Does that worry you? Terrifies me. Because part of me wants to hear it too. 6 months later, Dr. Rivers published a research paper on the unusual mineral properties of Blackwater Falls water during seasonal thermal events. Dr. Stone documented the extensive cave systems behind the falls and their potential archaeological significance. Officially, the mysteries of Blackwater Falls had scientific explanations, but I knew the truth. Every day, as I walked my patrol routes, I could sense the presence of the Cherokee ceremony keepers beneath the water. They were still there, still guardians, still offering healing to broken souls. The difference was that now people could choose freely, and many chose to stay in the world of the living. My faith, lost in the mud of European battlefields, began to grow back slowly, not the simple faith of my childhood, but something deeper. A recognition that there were forces in the world beyond human understanding, and some of those forces were dedicated to healing and protection. The Cherokee spirits had shown me that guardianship came in many forms. They protected their sacred site by offering ultimate peace to those who couldn't find it in the earthly world. I protected visitors by helping them understand their choices. Both kinds of guardianship were necessary. Both kinds were sacred. 5 years have passed since the water ceremony at Blackwater Falls. I'm 41 now, graying at the temples, but still pulling people out of dangerous water. The difference is that now I can tell the difference between someone who's drowning accidentally and someone who's being called by the spirits. Last week, a family from Ohio visited the falls. The father, a factory worker named Jim Collins, lost his job 3 months ago and had been drinking heavily ever since. When I saw him staring at the water with that dreamy look, I knew the Cherokee spirits had sensed his pain. "Beautiful view," I said, walking up beside him. "Yeah," he said softly. "Peaceful. Makes you think about letting go, you know?" "I know. But before you make any big decisions, can I tell you about some folks I know who might be able to help with whatever's troubling you?" We talked for an hour. I told him about job retraining programs, alcohol counseling, support groups for unemployed workers. By the time we finished, the dreamy look had left his eyes. He hugged his wife and kids, and they headed home to start rebuilding their life. That's how it usually goes now. The Cherokee spirits still offer their healing to broken souls, but people have real choices. Most choose to stay in the world of the living and work through their problems with earthly help. But not all. 3 months ago, I met Sarah Martinez, a young mother whose infant son had died of cancer. She'd driven 8 hours to Blackwater Falls because, she said, something called to me. When I found her at the water's edge, she was crying and holding a baby blanket. "They're down there, aren't they?" she asked. "The people who chose peace over pain?" "Yes," I told her honestly. "The Cherokee spirits maintain an underwater realm for souls who need that kind of healing. But Sarah, there are other kinds of healing too. Grief counseling, support groups, other families who've lost children." "I know about all that," she said. "I've tried it all, but the pain never goes away. It never gets smaller. And I can hear them calling to me, telling me I can be with my baby again." We talked until sunset. I told her about the ceremony, about the choice being truly hers, about the finality of what she was considering. In the end, she chose the water. I watched her walk into the peaceful amber glow that rose to meet her. She looked back once, smiled, and sank beneath the surface. The Cherokee woman I'd met years before appeared briefly, nodding to me in acknowledgement before disappearing, with Sarah into the underwater realm. I filed a report saying that Sarah Martinez had accidentally drowned despite rescue attempts. Sometimes lying is part of guardianship too. The Cherokee spirits have kept their bargain. They only take those who truly choose to come, and they allow people to make informed decisions. My job is to make sure those decisions are as informed as possible, and to accept that some people will choose peace over struggle. Samuel Flowingbrook visits every few months to perform small ceremonies, keeping the spiritual balance stable. He's training his granddaughter, Maria, to take over his duties when he gets too old. Maria is 25, college-educated, and completely comfortable with both Cherokee traditions and modern psychology. "Healing comes in many forms," she told me last month. "Some people need therapy, some need medication, some need spiritual guidance, and some need the ultimate peace that only death can bring. Our job isn't to judge those choices, it's to make sure people have real choices." Agent Cross has been back twice, bringing other federal agents who need to understand what we deal with here. The official reports still describe environmental hazards with unusual psychological effects, but there's now a special protocol for handling Blackwater-type incidents at other locations where the spirit world touches our world. "How many places like this are there?" I asked Cross during her last visit. "More than you'd think," she said. "Native American sacred sites, Civil War battlefields, places where great trauma occurred or great sacrifices were made. Most are dormant, but some are active. We're building a network of people who can handle these situations. People like you who've been touched by the spirit world but chose to stay in ours." Sounds like a lonely job. All guardian work is lonely, but necessary. Dr. Rivers still monitors the water quality, and her equipment occasionally picks up anomalous readings during the spring thermal events. Dr. Stone has mapped the extensive cave systems and discovered Cherokee artifacts dating back centuries, proving the site's historical significance as a sacred water ceremony location. But the most important change is in me. My lost faith has returned, but in a different form. I don't attend church like my father did, but I pray sometimes at the water's edge, thanking the Cherokee spirits for their partnership in protecting visitors. I've learned that there are many kinds of faith. Faith in God, faith in science, faith in human resilience, and faith in the wisdom of ancient guardians who died protecting something sacred. My job requires all kinds of faith. This morning, I'm training a new ranger, a young woman named Jennifer Storm, who has a background in psychology and Native American studies. She's smart, compassionate, and completely skeptical of anything supernatural. So, let me get this straight, she said as we walked the trail to the falls. You want me to believe that Cherokee spirits live in the water and sometimes convince people to drown themselves? I want you to keep an open mind, I told her, and to pay attention to visitors who seem unusually drawn to the water. People dealing with serious trauma, grief, depression, spiritual emptiness, they're more susceptible to the calling. The calling? You'll know it when you see it. They get a dreamy look in their eyes, like they're listening to music only they can hear. They walk toward the water without really seeing anything else. We reached the viewing platform, where a small plaque now honors the Cherokee ceremony keepers who died protecting the sacred site. The falls thundered below us, powerful and beautiful and completely normal looking. It's just water, Jennifer said. Usually, but water has memory and sacred places have power. Sometimes those two things combine in ways that can save souls or destroy them. I handed her a radio and a small pouch of tobacco. The Cherokee spirits respect people who show proper respect for their sacrifice. If you ever find yourself in a situation you can't handle, make an offering and ask for their guidance. Jennifer looked at the tobacco like I'd handed her a magic wand. Bob, I have a master's degree in psychology. I don't believe in spirits. 5 years ago, neither did I. But belief isn't required for effectiveness. Just respect and an open mind. A family with 3 young children was approaching the viewing area. They looked normal, happy, excited to see the famous waterfall. But something made me watch them carefully as they reached the platform. The mother, a woman in her 30s, stopped suddenly and stared at the water. Her expression changed, becoming distant and peaceful. She took a step toward the edge of the platform. "Excuse me," I said, walking over to her. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" She blinked and looked at me with slightly confused eyes. "Yes. So peaceful. It makes me think about my mother. She died last month, and I've been so angry at God for taking her. I'm sorry for your loss. Grief can be overwhelming, especially when it's complicated by spiritual questions." We talked for a few minutes. I gave her some pamphlets about grief counseling and bereavement support groups. By the time her family was ready to leave, the dreamy look had left her eyes, and she was smiling at her children again. Jennifer watched the whole interaction with growing understanding. The way she was looking at the water, it was different. That's the calling. Not strong enough to be compulsive, but definitely noticeable if you know what to look for. And you think Cherokee spirits were, what? Trying to help her with her grief? I think Cherokee spirits who spent their lives helping others and died protecting something sacred are still trying to help people in the only way they know how. But now people can choose other kinds of help. As we walked back to the ranger station, Jennifer was quiet, processing what she'd seen. Finally, she said, "What happened to you 5 years ago? What made you start believing in all this?" I told her the whole story. The missing families, the amber water, the underwater city, the Cherokee ceremony that restored choice to the equation. When I finished, she was staring at me like I'd told her aliens had landed. And Agent Cross corroborates this story? Ask her yourself. She'll be visiting next month. Okay, let's say I believe you. Let's say there really are Cherokee spirits in that water who offer eternal peace to suffering souls. What's my role in all this? Same as mine. Help people understand their choices. Provide information about earthly healing resources. Make sure anyone who chooses the water is really choosing freely, not being compelled by desperation or mental illness. And if they choose the water anyway, then we honor their choice and file a report about an accidental drowning. Jennifer was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "This is not what they taught us in Ranger School." "No, but it's the job we've been given." Tonight, as I write this report, I can hear the Cherokee voices singing faintly from the pools below the falls. They're not calling to anyone in particular, just maintaining their presence, ready to offer healing to souls that need it. The sound is beautiful and peaceful, like a lullaby for broken hearts. Tomorrow, more visitors will come to see Blackwater Falls. Most will enjoy the natural beauty and leave safely. Some will feel the spiritual calling and choose earthly healing instead. A few will choose the deeper peace of the underwater realm. My job is to make sure they all have real choices. That's what guardianship means, not preventing all harm, but ensuring that whatever happens, happens by choice. The Cherokee ceremony keepers understood that truth when they died protecting their sacred site. I understand it now as I protect their legacy and the people who come seeking what they offer. Some burdens are sacred, some responsibilities are eternal, and sometimes healing comes in forms that the living world cannot provide. The water remembers everything, the spirits honor all choices, and guardians serve until the end of their days, protecting both the seekers and the sought. This is my story. This is my burden. This is my sacred trust. My name is Robert Thunderstone, and I am the guardian of Blackwater Falls.